We are live. Huh? We are here, live and alive, with another TROM-Cast. Just a brief introduction to this one for those who don't know what we are doing. We do this kind of TROM, like this live recordings. Is nothing quite. We don't plan that much ahead. We just take a subject and we discuss it live, and anyone can participate to these TROM-Casts. And we do them. Sometimes we do them every week. Sometimes we do them quite rarely because depending on our time. And we stream, unfortunately, on YouTube and Facebook because we don't know where to stream, because those are big platforms where people flock together. But you can also see the TROM-Cast on tromsite.com/videos. We have all of them there. And yeah, before we start, let me tell you, like, this time we usually take a subject, discuss a subject, and then towards the end we discuss some TROM curated news. We've made these tools, these online tools, for people to stay sane in this quite insane world where it's full of clickbait and bullshit news and all kinds of like people for trades because they want likes and views and like money and whatever they get from this. They post all kinds of crap online. So we try to kind of curate this world a bit. So if you go to tromsite.com/tools, we have all kinds of tools there. We curate documentaries and videos and music and not music, but I don't know how to curate music. I don't know if it's much to curate there, but courses and software and so forth. So we take from TROM curated news, we take some interesting titles and sometimes discuss them. And this time, let's discuss them at the beginning of this entire thing. Hey, Alex, we will discuss it in the beginning of the cast a bit. And yeah, anyone can join those TROM-Casts, and that's the cool part about it. If you go to tromsite.com/chat, it's a live chat. You don't need any account, and we post there how to join. It's quite easy. So we encourage anyone who wants to talk about TVP or RBE to join today's cast, because we are going to talk about that. Okay, so a few minutes, I'll talk about what news we have. It's just to get them out of our way. So nowadays, because people are forced to stay at home because of this pandemic, they use all kinds of tools to communicate with each other. And we know that that's quite crucial nowadays. We take it for granted, but communicate with each other, sometimes, many times actually, it's not quite free. Like Facebook, WhatsApp, Zoom, even Telegram and others, they kind of control the communication. It's like a phone that goes to this company, and this company can do whatever they want. They can mine your data. They can, for example, Telegram can censor content because they have the power to do that, and they did that in the past. WhatsApp collects data and so forth. Others ask you for money, like Zoom. If you want to have video recordings for more than 40 minutes or so, you have to pay for a premium account and so forth. So Mozilla made an article to see how secure these apps are really, and they go through a bunch of them, the most popular of them, and how easy it is to use them, what they require from you and so forth. And yeah, pretty much all of them, some are secure because they are encrypted. That's good. But Mozilla doesn't focus on this kind of trade-free aspect. So these are not trade-free. You have to have an account with them. You have to give them data and so forth. Mozilla doesn't quite take into account that. So it's an interesting article from Mozilla. You can find all of these links in the description of the video or in our show notes on TROM-Site. But what I wanted to mention is that we also made an article on TROMJaro, tromjaro.com/articles. And it's like, with a different flavor, how to communicate in a trade-free way. Like even now, we use this Jitsi Meet application. We pay nothing for it. They collect no data except some necessary technical data. You need no account. It works perfectly fine. Anyone can join and anyone can use that. You don't have to ask them anything. It's like Zoom, but it's, I would say, it's much better in that regard because you don't need any account, anything like that. That's one of the apps that we mentioned. And there are several there. And I explain a bit in the article what it means, to communicate online, and how can you do that in a decentralized and trade-free way. Like imagine me communicating with Cody or with Alex. They are in US, I'm in Europe, so it's a big distance there. It's an ocean in between us. How do we do that? Usually we contact a server A server is just there are some computers owned by a company mostly, and then they connect me with Alex or with Cody, But because they have this power to do that, they will take advantage of it. So we give examples in that article how you can do it without that, and you may think like, how can you do that? Well, if you have multiple nodes, like people, imagine people with phones or computers. I connect to you, you connect to them, and so forth until I connect to Alex. So it goes all around the world, and it connects the two of us. You don't need any servers. And by default, in our TROM-Gyro operating system, we customize the Linux distribution. We have this QTalks messenger. That's a really cool one. You can do chat, text, you can send files, you can do video, audio, you can make groups and so forth, and that's how it works. So no one can censor it. That's what I would call a straight-free application. No one can censor it. No one can tell you have a limit of how much you can talk or to whom or about what. So it's an interesting article. I recommend you to read that one. Yeah, so I wanted to just mention that because many people use such tools nowadays. And yeah, and another thing I wanted to mention from those news is it's another news about how now like many artists and so forth, because they don't make monies from concerts because they cannot. And Dima probably knows because he Dima, because you also had some concerts, planned or some gigs and so forth, and they got canceled, right? Probably, as far as I know.
Yeah, sir. I just joined what you've been.
Yeah, I wanted
about.
to say that artists around the world who make money, lots of money, because I know that you don't really make money out of this, but who make money from such things, they say, from such gigs, oh, everybody pirates our shit online. So why not we put a law and everything that goes online, everything goes through a filter of the government. And then they filter the content, music, videos, photos, and then it goes to websites, which is a very slippery slope if they try to implement that. Not only this, but only companies like YouTube or Facebook have the power to make such filters usually, and to like small companies will be completely destroyed if they implement that. So it's an interesting news from EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, about this bullshit that they're trying to do it with the laws, as if that's the answer. Let's filter all of the content. Yeah, that was one, and we have two more news, and then we can go and discuss about the main subject. One is about quickly about the Tor project. Tor is this like I explained with this QTalks that you can communicate to nodes. Tor is the same when you want to browse the internet. Like you connect to all kinds of people around the world, so you can bypass geo-blocking, for example, and all kinds of other restricted content, which is really cool. But now, because of this pandemic, they had to fire 1/3 of their employees. So that's not good to see this kind of project, because it's probably the most well-known and robust project out there in this regards. Okay. And the last news. The last news is about, because we didn't mention this maybe that much this past to TROM-Cast, but we are still in a pandemic. We are still locked down inside our houses. And it's an interesting article from PBS about why Italy got hit so hard by the virus. And it's quite interesting. Like, experts are looking at this. Of course, they need more time to analyze. But I wanted to highlight just a few things, like why Italy got so fucked up. And among reasons is like, one, they are probably the biggest commercial center in Italy. So lots of shit coming in, lots of shit coming out, and because of that, it was extremely difficult to close that region. So also big companies lobbied to not close the region, So, hi Daniel, we are going to discuss about TVP and such in a bit. Okay, I'm just presenting some news now from Curated News. Thank you for joining. So, because of that, it was super difficult to close that Lombardy region, and because the business, so they delayed a shit ton, and it's also that they had the most nursing homes and all of this combustible mix of trades, because you have to keep those businesses running, and lack of materials and lack of hospitals and so forth and intensive care units, like completely smashed Italy, which is interesting to read, because it's not just like a problem of science there. It's a problem of how do you deal with resources and why trade influences these kinds of decisions so much. So yeah, that's overall what I wanted to say about the news and yeah, what do you guys how is it there? Just to, like, make a transition here, like how is it with the coronavirus now? How is it in US, for example?
I haven't seen a whole lot of difference still since we talked last time. I mean, the so-called non-essentials are shut down. They sent out the little $1,200 stimulus check. But
you got it?
Yeah, I got it. But you know, yeah.
Sasha didn't.
Yeah, I applied for it and I didn't get it. Well, they didn't say anything.
But
yes.
you had to apply, or there were
Yeah, because I haven't worked since 2017, so I haven't done my taxes in the last 2 years, 3 years. So I had to apply like in a special way. But
did they deny you, or they just haven't sent it yet?
Yeah, they haven't said anything yet. So
yeah, well, it's a joke anyway. I mean, $1,200 for most people, you know, it barely covers rent or, you know, some food or something. So
yeah. Well,
I heard in New York there was a lady. She was outside. I don't know why, but the police took her and put her in a prison with a bunch of other people because she was violating like curfew. Like, you're not supposed to be like outside hanging with other people. So they took her to jail with a bunch of other people. Yeah, that was funny.
So it's kind of the same. It's just this kind of bullshit from governmental perspective with giving people some money that is not doing anything really. So okay, but let's talk about how Jack Fresco had this idea about a completely different world and society and how it could operate and on all of that. And I rewatched Future by Design. I rewatched the TROM documentary that's about the resource-based economy. I did that with Sasha because we were curious, you know, how do we understand this idea now, you know, and what do we think of it? And before we begin, is Daniel, is your mic working? Can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me
here. So, how to describe this? Like, Jack Fresco had this idea, and we are going to unwrap more about it. Of you know, what if we are not as stupid as we are today, and we rely on this profit motive and work all day long and all of that? What if we apply science and technology and build the best that we can? Like, let's not rely on people having jobs. Let's make it automated, because we can rely on machines rather than on people. Let's make everything abundant for people, because when you make things abundant, you know, it tends to not go into, like, you don't need money, you don't need to trade those things, probably, since they are abundant anyways. And overall, how we can restructure our society using this technology and this scientific worldview to kind of push away the problems that we see in today's society. Because, like Jack was explaining in the Future by Design documentary, he tried to like fix this and that and the other, like, oh, there are some problems here, like the medicine, and then he tried to make some inventions and some houses, but he realized that it's quite futile, because this is patchwork. So even if you invent something that's good in a domain, it gets polluted by this business world and these trades. And it's, what if it's easier, he says, to redesign the entire culture, so society. So in the same way that you reinvent some tool that helps you in medicine, like say a scaffold or a machine that scans you or so forth, why can't you design entire cities in a way that they will not produce aberrant behavior? And he spent a lot of time, designing many models, like how housing will look like, how entire cities will look like, why they look the way they look, because the way that he always explains is like, it's not about technology really, it's about how to create a saner society in the end. So, and whatever he presented there is, don't take it for granted, because it's not going to be like that. Of course, it's just an extrapolation from what you know today, but such things will look different in the future. So that's what kind of they call it a resource-based economy, to base our economy on resources, like how many resources we have, how to intelligently distribute them to people in a way that will create good behaviors and overall scientific progress in all kinds of fields. So that's what I understand from what a resource-based economy is compared to today's society, in extremely tiny nutshell. Of course, it's a lot more. And if you guys want to explain, like, what do you understand from this idea, and we can go from there on.
I just want to comment really quick. Sorry.
Okay, one by one.
Okay. So I just want to say something really quick. I just want to thank you to you directly, because the Trump page that you put up several years ago, I still use that to introduce that to the Venus Project for people. And I appreciate your effort in doing that. And you remember me for a while ago. And also thank you for that introduction. That was really accurate. So I go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. I'm bad. Well, some may think that the resource-based economy is where a few people get together and decide how everything's gonna be made, which I don't think it's gonna be like that. But that's a misconception some can get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the examples of that Jacques made, that when people go to space, for example, they need to know ahead of time what resources they need for that trip. They need to know exactly what they'll need to survive with, for how long, everything in that system. So he's saying, you can take that same idea and apply it to the Earth, because we are a spaceship, going through the vast universe. And for us as well, we have, a certain amount of resources, and we need to figure out a way to intelligently manage them so that we can live sustainably for a long time. So.
Yeah, definitely. And what he always emphasized, and I think some people over the years that I've seen kind of lost a bit, is that the designs, whatever Jack was talking about, it was just a suggestion, a smart suggestion, an educated suggestion of how the world could be like. It's not like cities should be round. He explains why he designed some cities to be round, because you can design just, let's say, 1/10 or 1/8 of a city, like a pizza pie, and you can redesign that from a more like efficiency perspective, from a technological perspective, why that is maybe better, or like in the center are more important amenities like schools or health centers, and people can go from any point of the city. It's much easier to reach the center. So these technological ideas are not just for the technology itself. It's for to show you what efficiency can look like, in the future. Same with the dome shaped house that he says there are the least materials for that form, because it's round, so you get less materials put into that shape, and it's more resilient and so forth, So that's what he was trying to showcase. And what I always also got kind of from him many times is that you have to understand that this society pollutes people, this monetary system pollutes them. So let's go away from this problem, and he had this vision for how it will look like. Of course, some of Jack's ideas, like with anyone, even now, watching the Future by Design, some seem, of course, ridiculous in the sense that he couldn't predict. He may talk about going into someone's home, and the home identifies you, and then you say call someone from Arabia or something in the house. Of course, they have smartphones, and it's different. These are not. That's why these are not important. Even he says I can describe how houses can look like inside in my models, but these are just temporary ideas that will just fade away. They don't add up anything really. these things change so much in the future. So you can look at predictions from the past, and people will say, oh, in 2020 we are going to fly cars and we are going to had all kinds of ideas, and now we consider as ridiculous. But as normal, you cannot predict such things, you see. That's why I take the idea behind it. You understand?
Yeah, I think any idea, it depends on what's going on at that given moment. So, like if we started from this point right now and said, okay, what's, be the best thing to do from here? But if we started actually transitioning the way that we're talking, a year down the road or 2 years down the road, what we're thinking right now may not apply then, because we might be at a different point, but certain things like the circular city, I think those types of things are a given. That's how you kind of know if we go the logical way, that will be what cities will look like, because you can't really get more efficient than a circle, so certain things about his ideas, I think, will stand the test of time, because it's, that's how it's the most logical way to do it. I mean, that's not really going to change, unless we invent time travel or something, but otherwise the circle is the best, so certain things like that. But a lot of the other things, I think, will just depend on where society, humanity is at that point and what we're trying to do. But
but in 2013, speaking of that, of like the round city, and maybe that's a way to judge that technology, it's like this shape, for example, it's quite efficient and so forth. In 2013, when I was doing TVP magazine, their official magazine, so I was writing articles, sending them to Jack and Roxanne for review and so forth. I wrote a book, Automated and Autonomous World. I tried to take all of the Jack's ideas and see if they have a basis in reality in 2013. And of course, they kind of have, like self-driving cars. It was kind of the beginning then to showcase how they are going to work, but today is more like a given. They're not fully autonomous, of course, but they progressed a lot. Housing, how Jack was talking about these extrusions, like you make a shape. He explained with a toothpaste. If you put the shape of a T or something in a cap of a toothpaste or something, and you squeeze it, the toothpaste comes out in the form of the letter. You can do that with housing, for example. He said, or he may not have been that much aware, because I was talking to Roxanne back then of 3D printers. 3D printers also are, in that regards, maybe more efficient, because they can create a huge range of shapes and so forth. Now, when it comes to cities, I was looking like, are there examples? Are there examples of cities that are around and so forth? There are some examples in the world where communities, even the small villages, are built. I saw one in Germany, I think, some in Israel, I think. But I also realized that there are different kinds of shapes that are more efficient. For example, Masdar city is built in desert, so it's extremely hot there. They built it in this shape. It's quite square, but in order to create as much shadow inside the cities as possible, depending how the earth rotates, and the sun and so forth, and also to cool down the interiors of the city and so forth. So shapes of cities or cars and so forth, it depends what your goal is. You want to make the city cooler. You want to make the city like more efficient in terms of transportation, managing resources there, like waste and so forth. So these things can also vary. Of course, it's a complicated world, but I agree. Of course, I'm not an engineer. I don't know if that's true, like Jack is saying, but it seems to me as well that circular cities are also quite of a brilliant idea, in the sense that you can design one tent, and you can replicate like that. It seemed to me, at least, quite interesting.
Well, I just say that's kind of what I was meaning to you. Like, it depends on what you're going for and what is appropriate at the time or place, maybe where you're trying to do it. But yeah, a typical area, I guess, circular seems to be the most efficient, but it would still depend on what the area is and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of like other things like Jack was proposing in like technological, I've seen real models of, for example, he also talks about these buildings. So now today we have these big buildings with apartments built in. But what about if you have just the structure, just the spinal cord of a building, and then you have modular houses that you just plug them in, just plug them like that. How cool that be? That's another interesting idea I've seen from TVP. And probably you can, think about like when you plug your phone and your camera and this and that, the socket is quite the same, it provides electricity, but you can expand that like a boat. When boat park, they are in a port, they connect to water, then they connect to electricity probably, right? So it's a boat, it's the individual boats connected to the same system. So imagine the same structure, you put those houses in and they connect to water, maybe, and electricity and internet, let's say. So that's also an interesting way of modularity. And I've seen this talked about in the how it's called, metabolism movement in Japan in 1920s. And they did some of those buildings, some experiments of that, and looked cool, but I didn't see anything more of a bigger scale or continued in the present. But those two are feasible from a technological perspective. So I've seen that too. Bunch of such technologies.
And I think the idea with that is also efficiency, because I think his idea was also to prefabricate, these kind of structures, even entire apartments or houses, and then you can put them in place. So
yeah, well, they do that a lot. Actually, they call it I don't know if it's modular housing or something, but they, at least here in the US, I'm sure other places they do that, where they still go to the site and build the home from scratch a lot. But a lot of times what they do is I think it's called modular housing, and they build all the parts in a factories, which means you can do it 24/7. There's no elements, and then they just take them to the site and put the house together. So it's kind of the same idea, but.
But the message, of course, always, that's what I got. The message was always more important than the technology itself, because the message here was like how to make things more adaptable for the future and more energy and resources efficient. And I've seen that from the metabolism movement too. That's why they called themselves metabolism, because they said we have to grow with society. We can't, because if you go now, for example, in Bucharest, it's in Romania, and you'll see these very old buildings in the capital. And you may say, well, what the fuck? We're in 2020. These are really old buildings, not designed for standing earthquakes and so forth. It's the electricity. It's probably it's a very archaic one. The cables, how they are put, and all that, very unadaptable. They don't plan ahead for the many years to come, because those are very old buildings. Probably you see that in Russia too, right? Roma, you see kind of the same kind of structures, like built in the era of so-called communism and so forth. In US, you may see a bit like newer kind of structures. I've seen this with the internet. It's a good example. Internet, why? That's one of the reasons. But of course, US has less speedier internet than, say, Romania, because Romania, when the internet came along and this old broadband internet came, then they laid down all of the infrastructure for the internet in US first, and other countries that were more rich and so forth. Romania didn't do that. So then when they had to upgrade, because they were not that ready to upgrade, of course, that's just one of the reasons, but they could adapt very slowly to the, like, for example, cable optics. But in Romania, the cable optics came almost like first. So it was no infrastructure. They could put it directly. Like you have the fiber optics, you have it directly. But in US or maybe in Canada too, that was slower from that perspective. Of course, there were lots of monopolies who were incentivized not to upgrade. But that's just one example, Streets and so forth. Here in Spain, you have some villages, some cities where the streets are so narrow because they used to have horses to use horses for movement, but now you have to use cars, and everybody was like so crammed into these little spaces, So yeah, Jack's idea was like, isn't it easier to redesign cities rather than fix them? So what do you guys think about this idea of redesigning a city rather than fix it?
Can I jump in really quick?
Yes.
So I'm going to speak from a perspective of being a systems engineer myself. Usually when we deal with problems, depending on how bad the system is, usually it's, like you said very well, Tio, is usually better to we start from scratch. And that goes, technology-wise from IT all the way to electrical, all kinds of solutions there. So usually starting from scratch is usually easier for resource management and other aspects.
What like cities? When a city is a very complex system, what do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, obviously, I never had to redesign a city myself or build one from experience. But so I originally was born in Brazil, and I don't know if you guys are aware, but there is a city that's the capital. It's called Brasilia, and it was actually it started from scratch. It was built from scratch, and it's a designed city. It has the shape of an airplane. If you guys want to Google that, so that's usually I use that as an example. Again, I wasn't alive back then. I think it was in the 60s or 70s. But the few people that I do know that live there, they do like the design of the city, how things are. It's easy to move around. It's not round, but it's just the way it was designed to make it easy for people to move back and forth and, traffic-wise. Although, like you guys can probably already think about this, because it wasn't controlled, if everybody could move in, it eventually became chaotic like any other city. But that's my 2 cents on that.
It's always hard to predict also, how can you adapt it for the future? You don't know from how you will extract energy to how you will dispose waste and so forth. Maybe back a few 10 years or 20 years ago, for example, recycling plastic might not have been a thing, or aluminum or other things. So you don't put that into the city because you don't know it's a problem, So it's always a moving target.
Mhm.
It's always like that.
Yeah, and I think some of, probably most cities today are just so inefficient that, it is probably in the long term more efficient to just rebuild completely.
It will be a huge challenge. I mean, if you really want to rebuild the city, I was watching closely how they are dealing with that Dark City, and they invested a shit ton of money, many billions. And they wanted to make as efficient as possible from an energy perspective. They put the transportation underground because it's very hot in there and so forth. I'm curious to see how that is going to adapt in the next 10 years. Of course, that's a different kinds of city where they have malls and shit like that, and they have to sell bullshit. But it's so difficult. Even say we put a lot of cables for the internet. Well, maybe in the future, it's very likely we get internet from satellites, so you don't need that anymore. You don't need lots of cables. Energy can also be, if solar panels are more efficient locally for your house, you can get the energy directly to your house rather than a central system sending you the energy. Food delivery or how you deal with food or products, like Jack was also explaining, and that's a very good point. Of course, why is it that every house has to have a kitchen? A kitchen and a microwave and this and that. It seems quite of a waste of time, of resources. It's like in the future they will say you don't need a steering wheel in the car, because no one drives it. Same here. If you had a better system to deal with like how people get food to them, to order food and be more automatic, you don't need a kitchen in every house. Some may have it, or they will be changed. You don't need an oven and a microwave and a stove and then all kinds of things. You don't need those, all kinds of specialized like in Japan they have probably every house has this thing for rice. I don't know what that is, but they always use this thing.
Rice cooker.
What is that?
Rice cooker.
Well, no,
The technical name.
I think it's
a rice cooker. I thought they called something different, but everybody has that here. You don't see any of that. What the fuck is that? But if you could access that, you may say, I don't need that. I can buy rice from the store and I cook it. I don't need a specialized. So in that sense, we can reduce a lot of resources by not having everyone having a kitchen, having a car. I give this example in what was a TVP magazine article one time, and now it's a TROM book. Imagine if everyone had to have their shopping cart. and you have to have your own shopping cart and have it at home and pay insurance for the shopping cart and have a parking lot for a fucking shopping cart. You'll think that's ridiculous, but to me, it's not far away from having a car just to go and buy shit, and 95% of the time not use it. So yeah, that was another point. Like, technology will change in a way that we may use less resources. People may think that in this kind of society, when everybody has access to whatever they need and want, we will use a lot of resources. It can be actually the opposite. You may use a lot less resources. You see,
Oh,
you don't
100%.
yeah.
The market, obviously the market is what drives most of this resource waste. I mean, I think most of us understand that, the fact that you have to sell cars, you have to sell toaster ovens, you have to sell. So that's why there's so much of this shit. But yeah, it's unnecessary. And especially, you have a 4,000, 5,000 pound vehicle to move a 200-pound person. I mean, so a lot of that it's just inefficient, but the market system is what drives a lot of the waste now. So if you did away with that, a lot of the waste would stop right away. I mean,
exactly, because if you have the stuff that there, you really have to sell it, because if you don't,
Right.
you're not in the game. So of course it's the incentive to do that, but if you don't have that incentive, then people will not be motivated to do these kinds of behaviors. And that's another thing that Jack was always talking about, and what I really liked about it is that it's more about changing the environment. Really, here you're changing the environment to create better behaviors, and not many people focus on that. Like, I haven't seen that with the Mazda City, for example. I don't think they think that way. Yes, they thought about, let's make educational centers and this and that, but to not incentivize people to want to profit and then to want to put their own, they want to hoard shit and so forth. So that's another good aspect of designing this environment. It's almost like, although zoo places, the zoos are like a primitive way to deal with animals, or let's say safaris, but even there you have to study the animal to put it in a proper environment. You can't just put crocodiles with pandas, or lots of crocodiles in a climate that is going to make them more aggressive or more hungry and so forth. You have to do the same with humans. I feel like you have to create an environment people don't get aggressive and don't get to hoard shit. So I like that. He may call it like a systems approach or something like that, the approach of an entire system, how it functions. So yeah.
I like that example, Theo. If I can just add on to what you said there. Just personally, in my workplace, I work with 7 other engineers, and it's really interesting to see the behavior there when you talk about the environment making us be a certain way. I mean, whenever they all walk out of the office, they all talk about their girlfriends and wives a certain way, and their children, and that same old things. And this is lazy, this is bad, this is violent, or human nature this. But we're all back in the office, and we're all objective about fixing issues, bringing solutions. Everyone is really collaborative. Everyone really listens. And everybody works as a team. I always find that fascinating. I always go back to your videos too. Sometimes I try to show them some of them, but it's really fascinating how, what's around us is what really makes us a certain way. Otherwise, you go back to, I can't remember, his name was Alex mentioned before, it's really the money system and the trade and scarcity that just makes us really want to be mean to each other, to not like each other. And like you said, maybe changing the environment makes us kind of be more humane, care about each other, and wanted to care for obviously the natural world as well.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen recently with Sasha, we were watching this Cosmos documentary. The remaking of it is the third part of and overall a great documentary, but they had like 2 episodes. One was about our human nature, so-called our behaviors, and it was astonishing to me how they were like projecting that we may have this like a kin gene. We only care about people who are in our family because we want to transmit the genes forward. And I'm like, how come they don't take into account the environment at all? Like, the fact that we are egocentric is not. Where do you find it? Show me some studies that you can. How can you relate on some genes, on some brain patterns? Can you predict behavior based on those? And from what I've seen, no, you cannot. But you can predict behavior predict behavior by looking at the environment. Where people are poor, you will see more crime. People are more equal, we see more egocentric and hoarding of resources and so forth. So it's quite a disappointment to see that from Cosmos. And another episode was about the future. And they were imagining how the future will look like in 2039 or something. And it was a bit, it was nice, but it was a bit, it was a bit like focusing just on education, showing the people that we are connected with the universe and we should care about the universe and our fellow humans and other creatures, like almost like injecting education into people. I'm like, I don't think you can. I've been watching documentaries, amazing documentaries for the past 10 or so years, maybe thousands in courses, and I know this connection is amazing, mind-blowing. Well, when I won't have money, that much money, and I have to pay my rent, I may start to be a bastard. I may start to lie here and there, not care about the neighbor and so forth. So you cannot ignore this shit. I'm quite disappointed to see that, especially from Cosmos, because I thought that they are maybe more scientific. But it's a bit difficult to see this attitude of environment-shaped behavior, what Jack was always trying to emphasize. And although I try to criticize all of Jack's ideas, try to okay, is it true? Is it this and that? What I agree the most is this idea of environment-shaped behavior. I haven't seen anything. I've read so many studies to see, is this something? Can people be born predisposed with some brain that they want to hoard shit or to be mean with each other, or volunteers for that matter, right? I haven't seen any of that. So I like that aspect,
I just want to say with that, I agree. Nature versus nurture is the, I totally agree that it's nature. I think our genes dictate certain things, obviously, and maybe some character traits, but I need to find the source again. But there was a study they did with rats. This was a while back, and because that's one thing through science we've discovered a lot of. We can identify certain genes, like, okay, this gene is like the anger gene or whatever sort of thing. And they did that with the rats, and then what they did was they put them in an environment where there wasn't enough food, and the rats ended up fighting over the food and stuff like that. And they studied them over time, and that gene actually grew in the rats. And then they did the same thing with rats, but they gave them plenty of food, and over time that gene actually shrunk. Like whatever the thing was that was causing the anger, basically, like, shrunk in the rats, and they were like not aggressive. And I just, it's definitely the nature over the, it's the nurture over the nature.
The thing is, even with such studies, you always have to take into account that rats are not humans and humans are not rats. Even when it comes to how they react, rats, to certain medications, I think over 90% of studies in rats, in terms of even medications or diseases, do not apply to humans. Humans are so complex, so we always have to keep that in mind, that a book can influence our thoughts. A movie, something is so easy for us humans, because we have this imagination that I haven't seen in any other animal. We can project so much into the future. Like I showcase in the documentary, in TROM documentary, these so-called feral children, kids raised in extreme environments where no one interacts with them. They have no such things like empathy or any kinds of behavior that you may see in so-called normal human beings. So nature, even if you find some genes associated with some behaviors, nurture, the environment seems to override any kind of behavior, even if it's so-called innate there. So we have to be careful with rats. There are so many studies with rats with the intelligence gene. Some were studying rats and identifying a gene that they say is more with the intelligent, more towards geared towards making the mice intelligent. But then they showcase that it's not quite true, because if you stimulate another mice without the intelligent gene stimulated more, becomes more intelligent is the other rat who is not that stimulated. So it's a complex thing in terms of humans, and that's all I'm saying for now. In terms of genes, even the gene of height, they cannot determine. It's a classical example in genomics, I think. They say we cannot look at your genes and predict that you'll be taller or shorter. And they cannot do that. So if they cannot do that with such things, how can you even predict in terms of behaviors that they are hard to define and very influenced by the environment? So I'm just saying, keep all of this in mind with all of these examples.
I would like
Yeah.
to add.
Yep.
I would like to add. Have you heard of human behavioral biology by Robert Sapolsky? He talks about how
Yeah.
nature versus. Yeah, I thought that was like a more modern understanding of human behavior, which everybody needs to know about.
I think he also makes some exaggerated claims. Like here's the thing: I've seen an interview with him and Joe Rogan, and he was started to talk about this kind of like, oh, when people have when they are not hungry, or they say when they are hungry they make more mean decisions. For example, he was giving some examples, and every time he says something, I was like pausing the video and searching for the experiment that was done. And almost in every example that he gave, the experiments were either in rats, or they're done with 3-4 people or 5 people. So the interpretations there are very difficult. So what I didn't like about this guy Sapolsky is that if he uses this kind of examples and he's so sure about what he's talking about, then it's a bit troublesome, because no one would consider those as experiments. Was one experiment that he was talking about. Some judges, just 4 or 5 judges, they analyze them, how they give sentences to criminals before and after they eat, right? They have their breakfast. And they realize that after they eat their breakfast, they give lesser sentences. They were more nice to them. But it's like 4 or 5 judges. That doesn't scale anywhere on a scientific study. So I'm not completely criticizing that, but I'm saying keep that in mind, because when I looked at that, take it with a grain of salt.
That is true. I did.
What was the guy's name you guys are talking about?
Robert Sapolsky.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've seen his lectures, but then I was like, okay, where does he get his claims for? And it's interesting always to look what study was done. How can you say that when people are hungry they are more mean? Okay, it seems like, right, if you are hungry you are more mean. I know from my experience, when I get hungry I get quite pissed off, right?
Hell yeah.
Science is not done like that. It's anecdotal things, and what does it mean? I'm mean, but am I going to steal? Am I going? What is? Okay.
Good point. Good point. I understand. But
yeah, you need
overall,
bigger
I think
studies to prove things. What are you saying?
Oh, I think by overall, I think his view is very interesting and helps, doesn't it?
In terms of like, or Jack was also saying that you can even see how you can change the behavior of animals, and I think they also talk about, and like I said, it does not necessarily apply to humans, but it's a way to showcase how the behavior can be changed. And B.F. Skinner was one of those who made lots of experiments showcasing how, like, they did this funny experiment with a pigeon that they observed the pigeon, and every time the pigeon did some random move, like this with the head, they will throw some food, and the pigeon starts to associate this fucking like weird movement with the head with like food, and they just triggered a behavior. Basically, they change that in the pigeon. So I like those kinds of I haven't seen much recently, but I love those kinds of very scientific. Was one that was today will be, oh my god, people going to jail for this experiment. They took a baby, not kind of newborn baby, maybe a few months old, showing the baby a rabbit, right? And the kid was like touching the rabbit and this and that. But then after a few days, they showed the rabbit, and every time they showed the rabbit, they made a really loud noise, like bam, And then the kid started to associate the rabbit with something bad. And then they only showed the rabbit, and the kid was starting to cry instantly, right? So you can see how the environment, imprints our experiences, like change who we are. That's
Yeah, and
quite fascinating.
the kid might have like rabbit phobia for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or be traumatized by,
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'm going to say something. I know it's going to be recorded, but I'm probably going to get some bad mouthing for this. But I did used to have a girlfriend where she ate more candy than she wanted to. So one day I put something spicy on the candy, and she
Good idea.
took I think less than 3 days. So, but I didn't mean I did this with all good intentions, so that everybody knows.
You say so. Say so. Yeah, because what I also liked when Jack was explaining with behavior is like he did some experiments with a few animals. Like we have this tendency, because I get a bit triggered when I see nature documentaries saying, "Oh, the mother goose is like taking care of its youngs and then sacrifices for its youngs." And maybe, from our observations, it looks like that, but you don't understand anything about the behavior. And I think Jack was talking how birds, when they come to their nests and all of the chickens are doing this with their mouth, to get food. And you may say the chicken came home, the mom, to feed its youngs. That doesn't tell you anything about behavior. But what Jack did, as far as I remember, he did an animatronic, whatever you call it, like a mechanical bird that was doing just that, like a head of a bird. And the mom was feeding this motherfucker who was doing the most of this, more than its youngs, showcasing that it's just attracted to this kind of like whatever is that, the mother puts the food there, right? So that's how you understand behavior. I always like that about Jack, being more like, okay, what's the mechanistic here, right? Because else you don't understand what the fuck is happening. There are other experiments, really cool ones that I put in a TVP magazine, and now in a TROM book about behavior with the Todd, that like a frog, because I cannot pronounce the fucking name, like Todd,
Toad.
frog, whatever. Toad. Okay, Toad. Showing how it doesn't just attack like worms. The scientists put it in a glass box, and then they showed like a line, a vertical line, a horizontal line, going all kinds of directions, and realized by putting some things like in the brain to see exactly the current basically in the brain if it's activated, they realized that the toad, it's only reacting to just this kind of line, horizontal line, moving horizontally. That's all. The rest has no activity in the brain. It's almost like it's blind. And I see, that's what I'm saying. That's how you understand behavior. And you should do the same with people. Sure, people are more complex, but look at what changes their behaviors and try to change the environment. That's the point here. Think.
Yeah, I really like
the
those.
thing we get cut up. Sorry.
Me?
Go ahead.
Who was saying?
Me? No. I'm here.
I was just going to say, I really like this mechanistic perspective from Jacques all the time, rather than saying, okay, we just do this. You always have to look at what you're actually reacting to.
Mm-hmm.
What were you saying, no?
Well, I was going to add, sorry. Well, I was going to say that some may say, well, I have emotions, and maybe that creates behavior. You got to think about the internal state.
But even the emotions, they come from somewhere. Like, what triggered your emotions? It's basically everything that you're feeling is a result of whatever else you've been exposed to earlier.
True.
And it's always going to be a problem of a chicken and the egg. So it's like, but what if I just was staying at home and I was like hungry, and I was having this emotional reaction about something, and then that changes me because of that maybe internal state, maybe my discomfort of my stomach. Maybe there are some people who have, for example, psoriasis. It's a disease of the skin that like the skin replaces so fast that it feels like you are burned on your skin, and it's quite itchy. Probably that could influence, like it's like makes you more angry or whatever. But despite of that, you have to look at, not put the microscope so much on such things. We care mostly about like broadly behaviors, like what makes people violent in a broader sense, what makes people more volunteer their work, sacrifice their own whatever for other people, how to create a society, not these little nuggets that we may not even know the answer to. It's just my internal behavior, my internal emotion triggering me to change, but even that comes from somewhere, and you go into this, I would say, this roller coaster of you don't know, where it started from. That's what I would say.
You don't, but environment almost, the way I think about it, it has to. There's no, because what other influx of information do we have? You don't have any, we can look out in space, but the only thing we see that we pick up and we're, affected by is our surroundings. So what else could really influence? I mean, I know what you're saying, Tio. It could go different paths. So, in other words, this exact same thing could happen to me and you at the exact same time, but we're both going to take different things away from it. So you can't really say this is for everybody because everybody's going to react differently. But ultimately, the only information we get is from our surroundings.
Yeah, because you have to think that they react differently because of their previous environments.
Exactly, that's true. Yeah,
that's why even twins end up differently, So even if some will say that there are studies with twins that grew up in very different environments and they have similar behaviors, so how come? Well, how come, right? You just ask the question and they try to see what's there. But if twins in different environments will change behaviors very radically, that it means that the same biology being influenced by the environment results in different behaviors. It means then the environment, even if there is something there biologically, environment is always going to shape. And let's not, come on, it's not like anyone hates black people who is born hating black people or not liking Europeans or voting for this. Of course, this in general, our values, I don't know if anyone thinks that they come from something deep inside that is not from influence from our environment. We cannot project more than our environment anyways, right? So it is what it is. But yeah, Daniel.
Oh, and just as a question, because I wasn't sure. So when we talk about emotions, are we talking about biological, chemical reactions interpreted by our brain to the environment? Is that what we're talking about, emotions? Because there's some question about where it comes from.
Where emotions come from, or?
Yeah, I thought that's what I heard, and I was trying to understand what the context was. If when we're talking about emotions, if we're talking about the normal chemical reactions our body has.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
that comes from there. I mean, it's a chemical reaction. It's something physical. It has to be from all of what we understand in this world. Of course, it has to be from somewhere. But what triggers that, we may not know. It's a complicated mess of all kinds of thoughts and then influences from outside. And yeah, but yeah, that's a big focus of TVP, and I hope people don't forget this. Environment shapes behavior, so let's change the environment to change the behavior, right? So yeah, and what would you guys say about like overall this a society that's based on resources? Because some people I've heard arguing that we live in a society that's based on resources because that's what we do. We hoard resources. We put prices on resources. Everything is about resources anyways. So what would you say about that? What is so different about TVPs from this perspective of a resource-based economy? So,
well, because the TVP approach is to understand that resources obviously are limited. We're on a finite planet, and that everybody needs them. That's really, I think, where they're kind of coming from. So understanding that, the difference is they're looking at it like that, and the way we live now is saying, okay, yeah, we agree with all that, but we're allowing 100 people to own and control the resources. So it's dramatically different.
But allowing is someone allowing them, or is just that they are pushed by this environment and they want to own as much as possible, right? It's not like someone allows them, or is it?
Well, the system allows them basically, and everybody goes along with the system, whether you agree with it or not. So,
because even like in so-called other regimes called communism or whatever, they try to put all kinds of rules in place. You are not allowed to own more than one home or so forth, and people always seem to like bypass all of these laws because they are incentivized, right? So the difference with the resource-based economy when it comes to the Venus Project, from what I understand, is that it's in the context of the Venus Project, because many people took this concept of an RBE and said, okay, we want to build our own RBE, and RBE is like a general term. And I kind of never agreed with that because I don't know what they're talking about. Maybe if they explain what that means from their perspective. But for me, a resource-based economy is TVP's idea or Jack's idea of how this resource-based economy looks like. Else, it's confusing in my view. I don't know. What do you think, Daniel or Alex, who are very familiar with the Venus project?
Would you be able to rephrase that question? I don't know if you understand it.
Many people are taking this resource-based economy notion and saying that it's something more general, more like it's a thing on its own. And what I'm saying is like a resource-based economy is TVP's view, like how the world should look like. I cannot talk about RBE unless I talk about TVP, because I don't know what that stands for. Is in a context. RBE is in the context of resource-based economy. Else, everybody will interpret it their own way, so they should explain whatever they mean by that. So to me, TVP and RBE in that sense are one and the same. So what would you say about that?
It's a complicated question. I don't know if I can speak for Roxanne or Jacques. Obviously, he's not alive. So I'll try to do my best from what I understand as well. I think I'll go with what you mentioned before. It's simply a suggestion of what I think also Alex commented on that, a suggestion how things could be, I guess resources could be used better to create a better environment. So not everyone is trying to hoard things and going at each other. I think you guys kind of mentioned that. I think that all that answers. Now the Venus project, it's obviously, I guess it differs a little from the resource-based economy, because that's where how things would be based on that suggestion. And the Venus project, I guess, is just the whole project itself, explaining how that suggestion could come about. That's my understanding, at least. What do you guys think about that?
What is a resource-based economy outside TVP's idea of a resource-based economy?
Oh, outside? Ooh, I can't speak for other people. I don't know what interpretations people have of that. So maybe, what do you think about that? What do you think they have as interpretation?
I always want to, yeah, sure.
No, I was just going to say it depends on the people, though, because if somebody takes this idea, outside of the context of TVP, then they can they take the idea and run with it, just like with the idea of communism or with anything else, with any idea, really. I mean, so, yeah, I mean, they can interpret it, I guess, in a different way from how TVP interprets it.
That's why I always take the resource-based economy idea in relation to the Venus project, because else I don't know what they're talking about. I've seen people who develop their own ideas about the resource-based economy, and they are more or less copies of whatever Jack was talking about, which is not a bad thing from my perspective, but we need some context. So in this context, we talk about TVP's resource-based economy, or what they want to achieve with that.
But now we're talking about our interpretation of TVP's resource-based economy, right?
Always going to be your interpretation. Yeah. Like you don't know. Like I asked people from TVP who want to participate if they want to participate, talk about this, but whatever. Are you, Daniel, still with TVP, a point of contact, or you were?
Yeah, a point of contact and the host for the orientation. I'm sure you're familiar with all that stuff already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and also, I think I mentioned that in another TROM-Cast, but in a way, just talking about the resource-based economy, it may give people a wrong impression or a different impression of, resources are so important that we want to grow our own foods, and they go so into this kind of direction of self-sustainable communities. And TVP is not about self-sustainable communities; it's about a very different, completely different approach. So that's
And Tio, by the way, I really like what you guys are doing today, and I like everything you guys mentioned. Can I use this recording to present people about the Venus project? I think you guys mentioned a lot of things that was really well explained. So I appreciate it.
Of course, you can. Thank you for doing it. You can do what? Yeah, of course, you can. Anyone can use our materials straight free. You don't have to. Use them however you want. We can also have the recording, so you don't have to record. We can give it the recording to you. Have access to it anyways.
So on tromsite.com/videos.
Yeah. What is it to say about overall the idea of TVP? Because then I will go into how my view changed a bit over time and so forth. But I want to present more about the Venus project. What would you guys say more about the Venus project and what they are trying to do? What would you say that we have missed and so forth?
Just before I ask anything, from my perspective, usually when someone new asks me what you just asked, I usually, especially if it's in front of someone, I usually try to take into context who this person is. I like to have a little background about the person, if it's someone more academic, less academic, what the person does for a living, where they come from, what languages do they speak, stuff like this. And then I try to say something that has to do with what they understand instead of what I understand, if that makes sense. So to that, I would have to be given a scenario first who the person is. Or if it's a group, I did a presentation not too long ago last year to I think 150 people. So, but it was a particular place.
We'll just say that what the Venus project wants to achieve is mainly get away from this monetary system to create something that makes it irrelevant, to showcase basically how this environment creates really bad behaviors. And we as the Venus project have this idea of how the future could look like, to render those things obsolete. Do you think that's how it is? That's how I saw it, for example. I was wanting to ask you as well. It's a reaction to this problem of this system, basically.
Yeah, that's certainly one way to get started, for sure.
And it's basically an inspirational outlook on how we could, take the resources that we already have today and, make something better organized to have a civilization that's more kind of caring about itself.
Like
what would yeah, sure.
Oh, I was just saying, absolutely, efficiency speaks to me, and that's all I saw out of Jax is how can we make every system synergetic with every other system that we need to have in place? If self-termination is a symptom of capitalism or an inbuilt thing, then we are looking to take out any kind of self-termination that's built into this next kind of thing. And that's what I think Jack kind of addressed with TVP, was looking at the future problems and trying to account for them in advance as far as we can, so that we can build this sustainable city that as far as we can see is going to sustain and be renewable and take all these things into consideration.
And some characteristics of Venus project that I would say is automation, for example. Why is automation so important? Because Jack talks a lot about why do you put a human being there going and see, analyze the crop fields or whatever? You have to have sensors, So that's not only efficiency, but that's automation. And the more automation you have in place, let's say the better the decisions for sure, but the faster, the most efficient. However, automation itself, of course, is not. It's a tool like every other tool. Amazon uses automation to sell you more shit, of course, right? So it's also in a context. We need automation to make decisions more faster and better, because computers can crunch a lot of numbers, right? But it also depends what you want from that computer to crunch. Because let's take let's talk a bit about decision making, because there are many people that I've met at TVP, and they are a bit obsessed with decision making. We have to make a tool for decision making. There are some people who work on some websites to for decision making. I've heard, I've seen that many times. But to me, decision making it's nothing unless you talk about a context. It's decision making in what kind of context? In hospitals, they take different kinds of decision making. Take, for example, today's pandemic. They don't have enough ventilators, so they have to take some decisions. How do they take those decisions? I don't know. The more you look into it, the more you understand that they have their own protocols. They have their own scientific worldviews. Let's say older people have less chances to survive, so let's take the ventilators from them and give them to younger people. Is that a scientific decision? Probably, because you want that. Maybe you want a certain outcome, but if you want for everybody to survive, regardless of age, then you will ask different questions. So the outcome of what you do in that situation is going to be different. So for building bridges to doing sending spacecraft to some planets, like how do you decide to what moon, like to Europa, to Titan, where to send the first spacecraft? I don't know. Like it's difficult to say how decisions are made there. Are made based on what they want. Maybe they want to study more the water, maybe the methane, and then they will send to Titan. So what do you guys think about decision making? Like what's with that notion? You know, how should we think about decisions? You know, and especially in TVP's context, how they are talking about that, the decision making component.
I like to usually give a few examples to people. Does everyone in here have a cell phone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Does everyone in here use
Except
GPS?
Dima.
Use what?
Yeah. You guys use GPS on your cell phone to go to
Oh,
places?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not voluntarily, but Google uses it for me.
So usually I like to get examples that like everybody has used the calculator before. You know, when they ask me who's making the decision, and I ask them, who do you think is making the decision? Because I certainly use GPS once in a while, and I just say, you know, I want to go to whatever place. I want to go to a grocery store nearby here. And I've been there 15 times. Usually just from my own head, I have, you know, this is the quickest, least traffic that I go through. And usually when I put there on GPS, it does give me that same place. So I ended up being, no, it is the algorithm, the calculations seem to be correct most of the time. With the calculator too, when we do, you know, I know 327 times 1022. If anybody here can tell me what the result is really quick, I prefer to put that in a calculator. But who's making the decision? I think, Tio, I think you mentioned very well. I think these are all tools. And even decision making, you can use tools to do that. Now, how you intend that tool, you know, to how you give that purpose to that tool is how really things show up in the end, if it makes it better for us, if it's more beneficial or not. If I create an app that does GPSing and it doesn't do a good job, then somebody can say that that's not a good tool, but it's really on perspective. So I think decision making, the TVP, and probably what we use today really depends on how it's made, how the tool is used. But generally speaking, like you said, Theo, computers do calculate things faster, and they do tend to be more efficient. Because I still can't think of the calculation of the equation I just gave you guys, by the way. So
it was this very popular game that Cody is such a fan of, or was a fan of. What is this game? Let's see, 3, 2, 1, Pokemon. And catching Pokemons, and that uses GPS quite a lot. What they discovered was that the developers behind, not the developers, but the company behind the game, they were paid by McDonald's, or they were paid by whatever to send people with their GPS, this tool, just an example, to around McDonald's, or so they calculated how many steps people do around McDonald's or around Burger King, you know. So they use the GPS technology to do these kinds of things. That's why I'm saying it depends what your intentions are. And I'm sure Google Maps, if they're not doing it already, they probably will do the same when you say, I want to go from here to there. But then I say, okay, but go, you know, in the front from like on this mall, because maybe they get paid by that mall to just a little bit tweak that you know, that route there. So it's always right. It's influenced by this kind of things. I would say trades generally, like, because Google wants they don't want to provide you like with a mean to navigate. That's probably secondary. They want to make a business out of that somehow, you know, so they mine your data and so forth. In that regards, I would say what I observed for the past 10 or so years, watching so many documentaries and reading and this and that, is that in today's world, there are many experts and many organizations that know how to take decisions very, very well in healthcare, and then building all kinds of complex buildings, and in terms of self-sustainability and all of that. They really know, and I have no clue, because no one knows except if you are in that domain of expertise. what I'm saying is the way that I see it is take away their bad motivations, and then they will do the good jobs, then they will be able to take decisions. With machines, without machines, probably much better with machines, right? Because in today's world, it's much easier to do that with networks of computers. Yeah, so that was my point here, that today's world, there are these tools already, but depends how they are used. And on the other hand, there are people who know how to take decisions, but are very influenced by today's society, like experts in the pandemic. I think they knew, if you listen to them, how the virus was spread and what decisions they should make more quickly and so forth. But then it conflicts with politics, interests, and everything gets fucking polluted,
Yeah, I think when Jacques was talking about decision making, he was talking about decision making within the context of his idea of a resource-based economy, usually. So he was saying stuff like, we should automate as many decisions as possible. Whatever we can't automate, we need to have experts in the field make those decisions. Saying that it shouldn't be influenced by trades, by the need to make money, by profit. So just like what Tio is saying, take that profit incentive away, and you're much more likely to make much saner decisions.
Because I wanted to say this, that I felt like from some people around, maybe not directly around TVP, but I've seen people who know about TVP and so forth, they get a bit so obsessed with this decision-making idea that at least they give me the feeling that they have to tell the world how to take decisions. They're like, oh, the world doesn't know how to take decisions, so we should maybe make a tool and so forth to tell them how decisions should be made. And I didn't get that from TVP. I didn't, like, we know already, there are so many people who know how to take so many decisions. This world is very complicated, right? Just take organs for transplant. How are they dealing with that? It's a scarcity. It's a scarce organ, good, whatever you call it. It's a scarce service or whatever. There are people who know how to deal with that, and how to take decisions. So I would say it's a bit wrong when I saw people thinking that, oh, we lack a way of taking decisions. We don't know how to take decisions. What I would say from observations is that we know, humans know, there are so many experts in this world who know how to take decisions in so many fields, is that they get polluted by this present-day structure of our society. That's the problem, That's the problem.
We can use your Linux distribution as an example, right? I mean, some distributions are, if I can mention that, they're definitely had their incentive and motives behind it, and yours, which I personally use, and I want to thank you for that. It's definitely more what people call the cluster-free, just clear, and there's not all stuff that you don't need, and so on and so forth. It just goes along with what you guys are saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I think I almost said it earlier, but what we're talking about now, I think in general, you have essentially two main aspects of society. You have the system that we operate by, and then you have the individuals and the choices they want, and to me, TVP is a more systems type approach. They're saying efficiency, renewable, all this stuff. Granted, they do, and I know because I get their notification or whatever, they've clearly thought a lot about the human aspect of it and how people may react or not react. But I think overall TVP is more of a systems approach. And then you have the other side where it's ideally would be a true democracy, because no matter what, like you were saying, Tio, about, okay, well, say we use a system and we decide, okay, these 3 different moons that we could send something to, they're all, this has this one has this. Well, then who decides? Okay, so you have the machine that tells us that. You have the most smart scientists saying, okay, this is what I think. But then who ultimately decides that? And no matter what how efficient of a system you have, how much automation you have, you still are going to have a human aspect in there. And I think that's where ideally it would be a true democracy. You would have essentially a vote. Okay, well, we have to vote, because otherwise you're still going to have a hierarchy of somebody saying, well, no, we're going to do this because us scientists say that. But if all the other people don't want that, see, so I think there has to be a democracy in there, aside from the
But then
system.
with a democracy, some people may say that what do normal people know about sending, spacecraft to some moons? Like, why would we?
I
based on
agree, but then who is making that decision? See, then you're still going to have a group of people making a decision because they're going to say we're smarter.
The experts in their field, and then anybody can get involved and learn about that field if they want to participate in that decision making. Because I mean, I like this example that Jacques gave. It's if a doctor is operating on your mother, would you like some random people to vote about what he's doing, or would you like the doctor to make that decision, or the people involved,
Yeah,
the
that's
experts,
exactly
so.
what Jacques called competent democracy. It's like the experts in the field. And that's exactly what you, Sasha, mentioned. A good example with the doctors. And that's ultimately how the decision is gonna made. If you've got competency, if you've got education, if you've got the knowledge and everything, then you're not expressing just your opinion. There's like a knowledge behind and experience. And whether in normal democracies, just everyone is equal and everyone just telling their opinions.
Alex, can I ask you a quick question about decision making? So when you connected to the Jitsi today, and when you went through a browser, whatever you're using, when you clicked on buttons, who was making a democratic decision for you? Did you get to choose what kind of audio, the drivers, how much bandwidth for audio and video was traveling through your computer? Did you have to maybe consult 15 scientists for that to get done, or you just want to get the video going? And I was going to ask you, how about your earphones that you're using? I'm sure you bought it from somewhere. I don't know if you did, but usually people they look at the quality, the store, the pricing. That's all data. So I was going to ask you, did you consult other people to make that decision?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, well, right, because that's essentially the way I see it is that's a systems thing, so you're talking computer, headphones. So yeah, you can't argue with a computer. I mean, it's going to calculate the best bandwidth or now, of course, you're talking earphones, you go back to the marketplace. So I probably bought not as good earphones because I didn't have enough money. In fact, I had a set that the damn left ear just went out. So there you go. But no, I know what you're saying. Right. And that's where I think it's the systems approach, So yeah, it's a lot of things, most things I think overall would be made systematically because it's the most efficient, logical, but I don't know. There's still going to be some inevitable decisions that are going to affect people that, you can't just calculate like that because you have individual wants, needs.
Okay, let me put it in a different way here. I actually deal with automation every day. In fact, I create automation systems and, I will even be honest, for the things I create, probably some people went out of the job because of the things I create. But whenever I create something that's automated, I create it so I don't have to work on it. So it works every day and it makes a decision for me. It wakes up at night, does something in the morning, does something in the afternoon, creates other jobs or whatever it is. And I never have to touch it. I don't have to have anybody making decisions or even me, myself, going back there doing any maintenance. The whole reason for it is to completely automate it. Now, when it comes to making decisions to take care of people, I think that's where the context is. And I think Theo mentioned it. Is, for example, what's the best earphone for you? I know where your height, your weight, and whatever else, your needs are. It's probably not going to be the best earphone for me or clothes, whatever it is. So I think the whole concept has to do with what that particular area, if it's more of a desert area, or if it's in Romania or Spain or Japan or more earthquakes, what does the area need? What each individual needs. And you can sort of, again, working technology, I know that, like you said, systems approach, we can have systems that can make decisions without anybody ever touching it. Maintenance-free, redundancy, backups, all kinds of things that it will take care of itself. And whenever you need something, whether it's ordering food, or I don't know, listening to something, video, audio, whatever it is. It can be done, and you haven't when we need anyone to make decisions, or politicians, or even technicians, for that matter, if you automate it correctly, or appropriately, I should say. And I know I'm talking a very superficial, genetic way, but certainly if we want to give a specific scenario, I can definitely design something just off the top of my head right now. But I think that's where they're going for.
I would say that
nobody has to touch it, and it does decisions, even citywide, several cities, communities, whatever states, whatever it is. That makes sense.
I would say that our
Yes.
society, it's a very complicated place, and Alex was also right that there will be situations, even now in science, there are situations when they actually vote inside NASA to send maybe a spacecraft there or there, because the decisions are so on the edge, or the options are so on the edge that they don't know exactly. Like, would you build a Large Hadron Collider, or are you going to improve the internet connection for all of the people with that material that you put in Large Hadron Collider? That's why for me, what shifted a bit from maybe from my understanding of TVP or something is that look, the world is complicated. People take decisions all the time. Let's not touch that. Leave them alone, and you just take away their bad incentives. Not even try to imagine how people will take decisions in the future, because that's always so all over the place. Like, how are Doctors Without Borders taking decisions to take care of those people, but not those people? I'm sure there is a mix of science there, like, okay, maybe these people need more help, but also maybe could be emotions, could be interests sometimes. You don't know. It's such a complicated world. So that's why for me, the best approach how to deal with this society is to say, okay, the world is complicated, very, very fucking complicated. So just take away the bad incentives. That's why you see, for example, Wikipedia is generally a good source of information, because they're not that incentivized to write crap there, right? NASA, like I give many examples in the Origin of Most Problems, will take better decisions to explore planets and the moons than SpaceX, because SpaceX, it's a company, and then they will want some return of that investment. So that's why they plan to send some, I don't know, rich people around the moon or whatever. So decisions are what they are. You have to just extract, if possible, the bad incentive. That's how I think. Bad incentive, and let people do their decisions because they know what they're doing. I have no fucking clue how they decide to send to Europa and not Titan. I'm pissed off because Titan could be like a really cool place, but they plan to send to Europa. So that's we'll see. Maybe it's cool to send to Europa. It's like an ocean of water.
That's why,
Europa.
yeah.
Because
Because of
water,
water.
but also methane, man. It's like there could be some creatures in the fucking methane on Titan. You see, I'm pissed off. I didn't vote or anything, but I accept it, right? And one more example here, because that I think is an interesting example. Who decides to go, for example, in outer space to see the planet? Like now it's ISS, because this is a very scarce thing. It's a very complicated thing to achieve. Like, why don't they take me, right? I think people will get used to such decisions being taken from the top down, from experts and so forth, especially when they have more free time and have more leisure time and focus whatever they want. I'm pissed off. I would like to see Earth before I die from up there. But I also understand, I can't, probably I won't, very likely. So I'm okay with that, right? Yeah, but the society is complicated. So we will not know exactly. We can give specific examples like Daniel was saying. I understand very well, like, how do you take decisions of what bandwidth to use for a video and so forth. These are more exact, more encapsulated decisions, right? But of course, the world, sometimes it gets very complicated.
Yeah, you're right. It's very complicated. It's hard to talk about it in today's conditions. It's extremely complicated, extremely complex. And yeah, Alex is right too. You guys all have made good points. One thing I do want to mention is, like going to space. I definitely would not like to go to space. I prefer to be here on Earth. It's much more comfortable myself, just in case you guys wonder. And simple things like, let's say we are how many people here? I don't know, 6, 7. But if everybody wanted to know, for example, I would say, Tio has the best experience and has been, running TROM for a little while. So it makes more sense for you to continue running it, because I don't know how many people here have experience with that or worked with that, have the technical expertise to do this and work with some stuff. So I imagine that some of, again, this is my imagination, hypothetically speaking, especially as we are living the way we are today, to some things would you defer to technical people? And yes, we all polluted by, like you said, by the way we live, the way we're brought up, our incentives, so on and so forth. I definitely am included in that. But when it comes, for example, yesterday I just saw a doctor virtually, and I did defer to her when it comes to make a decision because she has more experience. She's more technically, I guess, prepared to make medical decisions than I am, even though I do have some because my ex-wife was a doctor, so I learned a lot, but I still defer to someone who has now. Obviously, like you said, Theo, she probably has her incentives. I don't know what they are. That's why I asked some relevant questions to see if she can, how she goes to them. But again, going to, I don't know, Mars or whatever moons. Again, if Alex was the engineer here at NASA and I don't know, Sasha as well, and they're both trying to decide, I definitely would listen to them because I don't have any experience that. Even if I did, I think they've been working on that for 20 years. I don't know. So I'll definitely defer to them. So there's definitely going to be a period of, I guess, adaptation if we go that route. In the end, we don't really know. And it's like you said, it's really complicated.
Yeah. Well, if you take the bad incentive out, Teal, like you said, obviously that would change everything because you wouldn't question. That's one of the problems, obviously, with the system. You can't trust anybody, whether it's a scientist, a doctor, your mechanic. You don't know because you always feel like there's an ulterior motive. But I agree also with what Dima said. I forgot the term you used. I guess it came from TVP. But yeah, like we're saying now, it's only common sense that the people with the most knowledge on that subject would be the ones to be the voting body on it, because what the hell, how could you vote? You don't really know, you're going to vote on something stupid. Well, this moon looks cooler, let's go there. But it doesn't, it's nothing scientific to it. So it would only make sense, to vote the people with the most knowledge of the subject.
Yeah, and today everyone, feels like they need to have, the right to their opinion and everything. But at the same time, they're being manipulated by these huge companies to want this and want that. So again, it's that same incentive from companies wanting to make lots of money.
And there's another good initiative. If we use this so-called competent democracy, I mean, if you want to participate in some questions, just go educate yourself, gain this knowledge, gain this experience, be expert in the field, and you will be able to. And that's like, to my side, is great motivation, for people to learn, to new stuff, to discover something. If you're really interested in something and want to take a part, you want to express your opinion, about the moon or whatever not. So to me, it's very healthy and progressive way of, structuring basically the society.
I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas now, exactly, if it was like we're talking an RBE type society and you were really interested, you could pursue that because the knowledge would be readily available, all this stuff. Now, if you want to pursue that, you're going to get $100,000, $200,000 in debt. You're going to take, so yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and Alex makes a great point. I think both of you guys make a great point. I think this is where, I don't even know how to add to this. Yeah, if you want to get an education and be able to participate, there is a limitation now. You do have to have a lot of money. That means your parents need to have money, or you probably can work your entire life. You're not going to get enough money to get the education you want. And then even when you do, it kind of transforms you, right? It makes you a little bit elitist. Oh, this other person doesn't have it. So it's, like Theo said, it's complicated. We get involved into it. We don't really have control of how we behave sometimes when we do get to that. It's extremely complicated. It's really unfortunate for all of us.
Yeah, whereas in the context of this idea of a resource-based economy, anyone would have an opportunity to educate themselves fully, into whatever they were interested in. So.
Yeah, because
we'll have great. I go on.
I just wanted to say that if someone will put you in the charge of Wikipedia, You don't know how to take decisions, how to run Wikipedia or whatever else. That's why I'm saying leave them alone. Just leave them fuck alone. They may know if it works and it's good. Just make sure that they're not polluted by this fucked up trade-based society. So kind of that's what I will do. That's how my approach will be. Yes, Mr. Dima. You forgot.
No important.
I erased your mind with my. Okay. What else is to say about the Venus project? What points are we maybe missing and so forth?
Generally, I found it very difficult to explain it to people, like just in a quick conversation with the person who never heard of. And it's like something that you cannot really explain in a few words. You have to really, really read a long monologue or, point those people for some other materials, videos and stuff. And as a result, people just not get interested. So for me, the struggle with all the TVP and RBE concept was, it's really hard to put in a few words to explain, like generally, to get, some people hooked up on it. Somehow, at least for me, it never worked, I guess.
You've also been a point of contact, right, for TVP?
So yeah. I've been a point of contact for TVP for quite time.
I usually explained it kind of like this, like, so. Sorry. So you have I want to show you the island. You have the island there, you see? It's an island and you want to put, say 1,000 people on that island, and then ask people, what do you need for those 1,000 people to be able to survive there? And how would you reply?
Money.
Yeah.
Money? What are you going to do with the money?
Of course.
They pay some other people from poor countries or rich countries to come and bring them stuff.
But okay, say the island has nothing, right? Start from scratch. It's an empty island. What do you need? You need money? How long will you survive burning money?
Then I need some slaves to work for me.
No, but if you ask these questions, usually people say we need food and we need water. Right?
Yeah.
And then you tell them, okay, well then how can you think about, what is the best way do you think we can make to make this food and water last, for an unlimited amount of time or as long as possible while on this island? Should we divide each other up into tribes and have each other fight for the food and water, or compete or trade for the food and water? Or should we figure out a way so that everybody has access to food, water, and their basic needs? And that's kind of how I explained it. I don't know.
Okay.
It's a good way of explaining it. I use it the same many times. What I realized when talking to people, you might be surprised of their answers. Sometimes, like you're now with us, some might say that maybe we need some struggle there. We need some trade between people, because if you make them equal, they will not progress. Some have this mentality, so they have to struggle somehow to invent new things. Else, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Some would say that. I don't disagree or agree. Maybe I disagree with this, but whatever. I'm saying some people will have all kinds of answers. So I understand that it's difficult to explain such things, but this could be an easy way. And you tried that, right, with other people, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, because I always have more answers after, progress to do what and da-da-da. But yeah.
It opens some doors to other conversations, for sure.
Yeah, those are good examples. I was going to mention that I always try to think of context when talking to people. Sometimes it can be somebody short, tall, they live in a particular area. I live here in the United States, in Colorado, Denver. And, do they live here? What were they, were they brought up in Florida, in Romania, in Spain, in South Africa? I tend to learn a little bit about the person first, and then I see what they want, what they need. Some people have kids, and they're like, "Oh, I wish my kids could go to school for free," or the person went to the military, for example. They have ex-Marines here, and then there's everybody has certain needs, and then once I figure out what their needs are, then I try to plug in whatever information to their needs. Say, how would you like if things were like this, right? Because what Theo wants, maybe it's not what Sasha wants. Sasha wants to travel more, and Theo wants to, be on his racing chair there. And so I know the way I come to Sasha is different than Theo. but obviously trying to plug into things that they want. Once I get them to like or be attentive to what I'm saying, then that's when I go more generic. And obviously something common to everyone, like money and so on and so forth.
What do you say to such people who said, like, if we go back to the example of Sasha made about the island, and you need water and food, and the person you're speaking with telling, yeah, it's all cool, but I want my source of water, I want my source of food, I want something mine. It's like the way we live our lives today. It's very egocentric. It's always about me, and of course, we all understand why and everything. And so people might kind of agree partly with the idea of sharing all the resources, so everyone is kind of equal and have access to everything. But I just want my stuff. I want, what would you say to such?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said, I try to cater to everyone. So if somebody does ask, and I did hear that before, I want my house, I want my things, I want things to be squared or triangular, my water, my chickens or something in my backyard. So I usually ask them more questions. Like, how come you need that? How come you whatever? And usually that comes with, it's directly related to how they were brought up. How they brought it, their parents brought them up, or they went to school. And once I figure out enough, like, why you need this, why you need that, and they come, and they do, people are generally open to say why they want it. Oh, because I want to make sure that my water is very clean, or I don't want it to be like Michigan or something, or I want to make sure that my water doesn't have, I don't know, chlorine or blood, so on and so forth. And then once they're really open, and that comes from systems approach as well, problem solutions. Everybody usually will give their reasons why. Once you find out, I think it's really easy to navigate that way. They'll say, oh, I want it because of this. Oh, you can definitely have that. How about if you and your family could have that as well? Again, catering to, their stuff, their lives, my family, my things. Yeah, your family, your things, your friends. Only them, yeah. Just at least get started with that before getting more generic, because otherwise you really lose them. And I want to make sure I mention, at least from my experience, and I think it's also spread for people who run about the project, we don't have to convince everyone, because some people, I've definitely come across them before I even came up learning about the Venus Project. Some people, they just really want to just argue. They just don't want to really listen. It doesn't have to be about the Venus Project. It can be about anything. You're talking about food. You're talking about cars, jobs. They just want to argue. They just want to say, my way is the best way. That's the only thing they want to say. And if you want to get along with them, you have to say, that's right. Your way is the best way. And they have the conversation. That's all we can say. I'm sure you guys came across even your own families.
Oh, yeah.
I found it really hard to communicate with person who are kind of, how to say it, I don't know how to put it, like made it in this life, who are rich and they've got everything, so, or they may come from rich family, they will basically had everything. And I had few conversations with such persons about TVP and stuff, and it's just impossible to convince them, because in a way, in this system, they have advantage over, most of other people. They're rich, they've got everything they want, they've got free time and everything. And like the concept of being equal, and even in such circle, everyone around will look no, just live better. But for them, the advantage, like a reason for them to kind of abandon. So found this really hard.
That's always a struggle, of course. It's especially when talk to such people who are having a good life in the society, because you present something to them, a different kinds of society, and they are like, but I'm fucking fine, And that was also my another struggle that I had with when trying to present TVP, and when I was working with TVP, is that a TVP, you talk about a hypothetical society. Of course, it doesn't exist, right? It's on paper, it's on nice designs and so forth, and people will say, well, but bullshit. Like it's just someone's ideas, give me a break. You're not realistic. You're not. And more I started to a bit understand their point of view. And I switched when I moved apart from TVP. I switched to something different. I switched to giving them real life examples and saying, look, what also Jack was talking about, look, this environment makes us behave really, really badly. And I will give them all kinds of examples, like from Elon Musk to Bezos and so forth. We behave so badly. But when you take away that incentive to behave badly, this force of trade, like as we are like monopoly in the monopoly game, we all the time play this fucking game, you get better products and services, like Wikipedia that every rich human being uses. Like even the GPS is invented by like grants from the government and not competition from all kinds of companies. You get lots of entertaining whatever books or whatever. I can give many examples and so forth. And I'll say that for me was more I was more successful in that way with such people, because they will say, okay, that's not hypothetical. I can give them many examples of how it works in the society for volunteers to, like, I give them the examples of Doctors Without Borders or RNLI in UK that save lives at sea, and even rich people, they have to rely on that, or healthcare systems or Red Cross and so forth. So I found out from my experience that it works better to give them real life examples and be like, okay, well, what about this? How are they doing that? How is it that 10 million people are volunteering for whatever NHS or whatever the fuck the institution? How come? And it worked better in that sense. But my point here was that because we talk about a hypothetical society, of course, I think from my experience, people say no, it's just a hypothetical society, and I understand in a way, and I'll make more points later on. Like, anyways, if you guys want to add anything, your experience.
Yeah, that's funny because when I bring up religion or somebody brings up religion, I don't see any people that have trouble with creating hypothetical imaginations about that. Way that some things to some humans seem to make a lot of sense, some it doesn't. And this is where I think I try to usually remember to be empathetic to people's behavior. I always go back to your videos, Theo, from the Trump page. We're really conditioned to be one way or another, wherever we come from, where our parents teaches us, oh, you got to be this, you can't talk, or you talk too much, whatever it is. So sometimes if someone does come up and say, oh, this is too hypothetical, it's never going to come up, or whatever, and there are usually patterns to people that say stuff like this, I always say, that's great, you're a wonderful person. I'll talk to you later. That's all I can do sometimes. But it's funny because their logic, to some things that makes logical sense, to some they have tons of questions. And they do talk, oh, this can never exist. So, to me, I just try to be patient and empathetic to people. That's where they come from, conditioned really well. And I just wish them the best when it comes to that.
It's never easy to do it quickly. I mean, kind of like Dima was saying, it's always, I mean, when you're talking about literally a different world, you can't explain it in a paragraph or two. But what I've personally found is I've tried a lot of different approaches as well. I found the issue with kind of going the route, Theo, you mentioned, of naming specific stuff. It's too much back and forth. It's too much arguing, because then, okay, even if you kind of prove that to them, they're still thinking, well, what about all this other stuff? Not that it's easy, and there's still people you're never going to reach, obviously, but what the most generic, quick approach that I've found is what Sasha was saying. I just say that. I say, okay, well, because imagine if you started, take an island or even a planet, say we just found this planet and there's inhabitants on it, and you find out these inhabitants need these things to survive. What would make the most sense? Because to me, the reason I think that kind of works the best, if that's the way you want to say it, is because you're instantly not thinking about everything that's already in place. If you think about it like that, because then, okay, well, yeah, what's the resources? What do they need? If you say something like, if you take a specific thing that's already in place, people already have these, the way things are and what we have to work with, like money or whatnot. But if you just take all that away and start from a blank slate, I even wrote a piece on it called Start from Scratch. Because when everything is broken, there's no need to try to fix it all. Kind of like you were saying about your system's job. You know, if something is basically totally corrupt or whatever, why try to fix every little aspect of it? You just start from a whole blank slate. And I just personally have found, not that it's necessarily good results, but it's better results, I think, when you approach people with that. And then you can lead them into the TVP, or, you know, hey, well, look, if you check out this website, it'll kind of give you an idea of what I'm saying. You'll see, you know, whatever. But to just kind of break the ice, so to speak, I think that's a good approach, is to start from blank and to say, okay, well, if you had an island or a planet or something, and you had resources and everybody needed these same resources to survive, and you supposedly want to be a fair, just, equal system, what would you do? And leave it in their court.
That I will say, from what I've seen, that people will say, well, but that's, even if they agree with you, that, oh, of course, no, we have to distribute resources more equally and so forth, but that's not what it is today. You know, you cannot start from scratch anywhere. You can't just reboot society on another planet or even on this planet. So what would you say to that then?
Why
even
can't
if I
you?
agree with you, it say, okay, it seems saying.
Okay, but then, okay, let's take it from that. Then you're saying you can't do that. But imagine, I always think, for some reason, I don't even remember the movie, but I think of the damn movie Encino Man. But just imagine if you just started right now with everything that's in place. Why couldn't you just say, well, okay, well, let's just start, take all the resources into account. What distribution do we have? What logistics?
But
I mean,
that's what I've seen, is like, even for me, that's very unrealistic to think that we can start as brand new, like a brand new society, because you always start with different mindsets. Like, you don't take people with empty heads, or empty hands. Of course, they take the same people, and I've never seen that as a way to go to talk to people, because it's just too outlandish. Even for me, more and more, if I feel like it's quite outlandish to think that we can regrow our society, we can make it somewhere else, like a demo of our society, like, look at this and we grow from this. That's why I'm saying, for me, it's better to take the society as it is and try to fix it by not patchworking it, by focusing on what the problem is there in the society, rather than inventing a new one. And even if you invent a new one, you may end up in the same place. They will do that, and you will. I'm sure that if we will see, but they will go on Mars, they will go on the moon, and they will rebuild all that. And I'm sure they will get into all kinds of trades, because they need some resources from planet X, and then Musk will bring them the resources at a lower price than Amazon, and there will be like all kinds of such forces, and they will become, they will become polluted more and more, because they don't understand what in the environment makes bad behaviors in general. That's why my focus is on this trade-based environment, that makes people compete with each other, regardless what you put in that place to replace this trade-based society. Focus on the problem, and with that in mind, maybe you can grow a new society, or alternatively, you can fix this one. That's how I see it.
Real quick, just like it or not, obviously you have to start from this point. Yeah, it's a hypothetical and it might lose people. I just was kind of saying that because people are so ingrained in everything that they know, that I don't know. I just think it's a way to kind of make people step back and question things differently. But yeah, it's not no easy answer there. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to, use that example of the island when I introduced this idea of a resource-based economy, not to be taken literally as we can rebuild, from scratch, but just to have people, have a kind of a different understanding of what we're doing with the resources. We have this planet, we've divided ourselves into tribes, and we're competing with each other against these resources. And some manage to hoard a lot, while others, more than half, barely have enough. So just to put that concept out there, but not as like a literal thing that, okay, we should start from scratch.
Yeah,
and
that's
even,
what I meant.
Yeah, and now actually I don't even talk to people about a resource-based economy anymore, usually, because I see it more of just an inspirational idea, which is a great inspirational idea, and I think Jacques was a really inspirational character. But just like Tio was saying, I think it's much more relevant and important to talk about the problem of today's society. And realize how integrated it is in everything, because no matter what, we can't start from scratch. We can't be blank slates in our head. We can't just take resources because they're already owned by other people. You can't just deny owning anything or money, and you just can't start from scratch on this planet.
So,
TVP, Daniel, is TVP more than inspirational, like to boost some inspirational ideas into all kinds of people to change the society, or is it more than that? What do you think? Is TVP more than just an inspirational idea? Is TVP more than that, you would say, in general? And if so, how?
Yeah. Okay. If it's more than inspirational idea, depends on what your concept of inspiration is. I would say, if it's similar to mine, I would say, I think I'm going to go back to what you said before. It's a suggestion. It's, how can I say this? It's a, Jacques used the word blueprint. You can say architectural design. It's an idea. It's basically, if I see your room and then you consult me as an engineer and say, hey, Daniel, I'd like my room to be a little bit better for I don't feel good about it. I feel like constricted. I don't walk around very much in a free way around it. What would you do? And then I'll suggest something to you. I'll give you an idea. And that's all I can give you. And then you get to decide if you want to go ahead with, and it's usually more than one idea that I gave you based on your room size. I can see through your picture right now, right? It's a particular size, so I have to work with that. Then you get to decide what you want. I would say it's more towards that area. And I want to go, if I'm permitted to, I'd like to go back to what Alex was saying. And you guys were mentioning it's hard to go back to a blank slate. It'll be really difficult. More because of cultures and so on and so forth. And like you guys say, the word is complicated. But from a technological standpoint, it would definitely be, I would say almost the word easy for it to be done. I mean, you can definitely construct cities along in certain places and eventually move people around. I mean, anything can be done with technology and design. At least I remember one of the things we always say at work, anything can be done with enough resources. We don't even speak about money. If enough resources are given to us, we can make anything happen. With that said, what I wanted to, if I answered your question to you, another thing I want to bring about to you guys, I want to hear what your thoughts are, is since we can't really, blank slate everybody's thoughts and conditionings and backgrounds and what they learned since they're children, what do you guys think of what Jacques mentioned when he says march of events? And the fact that through history, things happen because of those events, not because people want it. It's really because of their need. And if there were to happen, obviously, it's always a slow process. This march of events continue to happen. I was going to mention First World War and Second World War, where there was a lot of countries that were just decimated, and they did rebuild it. Obviously, they rebuilt it just to the way it was before. But I wanted to see what your thoughts are on that. I know a lot of people think it's very pessimistic, that a lot of people don't want to suffer, but it seems like the way things tend to go slowly towards. I want to see what you guys thinking is.
I didn't get fully. Can you just rephrase again, short, like briefly, about what you?
Yeah. So Jacques talks about march of events, and I wanted to see what you guys thought about that, because of what you guys were talking about, not blank slating society, not creating all the cities from scratch, not erasing everybody's mind so they can think in a different way. And are you guys aware of the march of events that Jacques talks about in his book and some videos?
I don't know the word. I don't know if I understand the word. Maybe that's the problem here for me.
So march of events, like marching, like
march of events.
Yes.
March of events. Okay.
Yeah, like like a troop is marching, a military troop is marching.
Yeah.
I think he mentioned that because of history, along with other futurists. Because if you study human history, it has always been about violence and people taking over others and Persian empires and kingdoms, and there's always suffering, always people taking over and revolutions. but things tend to be around the same. Like we talk about the same way, we do the same things. When I go back to Brazil, or even here, I joke to people that we like just like in the 1800s, it's still the same thing. So I wanted to see what you guys really happening, how you guys see it. If it's gonna take a major, very slow process where everybody's really suffering, there's very little to come about in terms of resources for people to be like, hey, perhaps we ought to think of something else. Is there anything out there?
Yes, it's going to take something like that.
It depends also what you want to. Okay, sure.
Well, I was just going to say, again, because all throughout history, you've had a ruling class, and, you know, they're not going, obviously, thinking the way we are. They're not thinking what's the best, most efficient, you know, those types of things. So society, I know what you're trying to get at. And yes, the way it is, no, because true change always comes from the ground up. Because the status quo is never going to change things. They're only going to give you enough to shut you the hell up, and then so they can keep going on with their thing. So yes, knowing that true change always comes from the ground up, people don't buck enough and resist enough until they're essentially forced to. So yeah, I think it's going to take something dramatic. Yes.
What kind of change do you think came from ground up, for example? Do you know some of these kind of big changes coming from?
Well, yeah, if you look back at history, any major change, unless they, you know, you're talking something like they built the Colosseum in Rome. Well, yeah, that was done from the top, but they did that from the top because they understood you keep the people appeased, they'll let you rule them, you know. So those types of changes, but other, at least speaking from U.S. standpoint, you know, it's always been through people rising up and resisting and saying, you know, we want fair wages, for example, or we want the right to do this, or, you know, this isn't just fighting for this. And you put enough pressure on the leaders, they're forced to make change happen.
Mm-hmm. Because, yeah, I don't know. I was thinking that if you think like what a big change is, so we can think of a big change in Europe. What happened was, for example, the healthcare system to become like free in this like tax way, but free for people. That happened, as far as I can tell, from almost like a top-down decision after the war, because they really needed that kind of like to just let people go to the fucking hospitals, don't pay that much or not at all. That was one. Another one was vaccines, for example, dealing with viruses or bacteria. It was like a few people who discovered these kinds of things, and technology and science like completely changed the way that we deal with infectious diseases. Other kinds of technologies like steam engine or computers came from a handful of people being either pushed by wars like Alan Turing or others to decode all kinds of like messages from Hitler or whatever, or from need or from just curiosity. And they changed completely how we interact with each other in this society, how we communicate, how we eat, and so forth. But overall, what I've seen in the, if you look at history, from what I've read, of course, I'm not a fucking expert or anything, but I've seen lots of courses and so forth. The only constant that I see in our society for the many thousands of years is that the only thing that we do mainly is trade ourselves. We that's what we live for. That we live for, like giving our energy and our time and so forth to get something in return. And is this combustible mix and inequality here that fucks up the educational system, fucks up how we deal with transportation. It influences decisions in science, it influences decisions in everything. That's the only constant that I'm seeing. Because if you look at today's world, we have internet, we have high-speed trains, we have spacecraft in the like going to other planets. Okay, all of that is mind-blowing. Like someone said, tell someone from 100 years ago that the main way we communicate with each other is by tapping with a finger on a piece of glass. You know, they will be like, what the fuck is that society about, right? It will be like mind-bending. So our society in terms of technological advancement and so forth and scientific understanding, it's a lot different from 100 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. But if you look what people do day to day in their lives, They do the same stuff. The fact that I work on the computer to get some food and pay the rent or just stay in this house is the same way that a guy did 100, 200, 1,000 years ago, trying to pay its way, like being subjected to these kings, whatever, being slave or having some cows. Cows or computers, are the same things, are tools to trade with in our society. So that's what I've seen, right? That's the constant, but that's the change. The change is more technological, scientific. The constant is the fact that we rely on trade, basically. We just do that all of the time. That's why most of our lives is spent like that. Like, look around. Honestly, people ask, I think people should ask simpler questions, not complicated questions, simple questions. What do you do day to day? Look around. If you are like a giant, imagine people like ants. Take anyone at random, right? See what they are doing in their day-to-day lives. Very likely they have to get something from this society. They have to get food, they have to get water, they have to pay the rent, they have to go somewhere. So they trade all of their lives. They don't just stay and get involved to improve the society. So I think that's the key here. If we have the same society that's based on trades and all of the human beings are busy with that, then doesn't matter how much science you put in technology, people's lives will be quite similar to those in the past. And that's their main activity. And that's what I would say.
So just, and I'm sorry I miscommunicated on this, or wasn't clear enough. So what I meant my major change was like a natural changes, like pandemics, like the ones we have now. Like I think there were some major systematic changes in the past. I think forgot if it was from some kind of like monarchy to feudalism or the opposite of that. And after, it was a Spanish flu, I forgot which one it was, and the ones before that, talking about major earthquakes. If I'm also talking about like even a world war, even though it was caused by us, it was a major change. I think what happens is afterwards people go back to what they used to. Or if they do, they slightly change a little bit. I think like Alex mentioned, instead of having what is it called? A king, now we have a CEO, right? So it's what's that?
Bezos is our new king.
So it basically goes back to the same thing. It just changes the names.
Mm-hmm.
And was I clear now? The major changes. There's things that happen to our lives, our needs, that happens to humanity, and those things makes us question and pretty much destroys where the country system is, because, like you said, they're based on trade, which, obviously because things are scarce, so people have to figure out a way to, I guess, distribute the resources, the few that they have. So it goes back to the march of events, in a way, that Alex was mentioning. So you said you understood. I still want to know from you guys if Alex said that's the only thing he can see. I think Jacques Fisker is the only thing that he could see as well. I don't know. Also, I don't see any other way, because things has always continued to be the same. Let's go back to the same stuff. Let's just do it a little bit better. That's what people always, being optimistic or whatever they call it. Let's do the same things, a little bit different. Let's tune it a little bit here. We do that in our daily lives too, right? My wall has a hole. I'm just going to patch it up a little bit. It's going to be okay. So
we live in one of those moments right now with the pandemic. We live a bit because it kind of messed up with the structure of this society. But like we discussed in the previous TROM-Cast, I'm not sure if that's going to kickstart anything or change people's minds. It's so complicated. We don't know, because look at us. We say, I know that you mentioned scarcity, and we had a big TROM-Cast about our scarcity versus trade, what creates chicken and the egg. But like, I stay here. Like, I can show you guys. Like, if I show you with my camera across the street, you see that empty. You see that empty. An abundance. That empty is like thousands of apartments. Abundance of apartments. The only reason I cannot stay there is because I cannot trade some. If I had lots of money, or if I was like a YouTube star or whatever and make advertisements for them, I could stay there. So I know I don't want to get back into the trade or scarcity, but I wanted to mention that even in this society with this pandemic, where we have so much of abundant shit that is not available to people, I'm not sure if this is going to change people's minds. I wish, you know, and I'll try to make a documentary. Actually, I'll try to kickstart the Trump 2 documentary, and based on this situation, you know, in the next few weeks. I'm doing my best, but it's so fucking complicated that this kind of events that seem catastrophic, it seems that they kickstart the same kind of society. Maybe they plant some seeds. I hope so. I fucking hope so. That's why I'm doing this kind of fucking things, right? But I'm just saying it's complicated. I don't know. I don't fucking know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think, and again, I'll go back to your videos on human behavior, which are great. You have some with Jacques Fisk as well. It goes back to people being very well conditioned, right? And that's the only thing they know. I think you mentioned before the phrase was, we can only project an environment, right? We can go outside of that. I think you mentioned that a few minutes ago. So in a way, I am actually empathetic to most people. How could they know? I definitely, 5 years ago, I had no idea. I thought, you know, there's no other way. I really thought this is the only way. There's no other way, and things are always going to be the same. If it wasn't for this, how would I know, right? So you're totally right, Tio. Whether it's, you know, it's not a matter of it's A or B or scarcity or trade or chicken and egg, whatever it is. By the way, I like eggs more than chicken, just in case you guys wonder. But at least I. But yeah, in the end, it seems like people are conditioned to what they know, and they always go back to that because the only thing they know. I mean, unless they're go back to your right, presenting something new. This is a suggestion. What you guys think about that? And that's going back to that TVP question. You know, or is this an inspiration or is it a suggestion, idea? Here's something new.
Yeah, I mean, well, in this society, they also kind of have no choice but to go back to this trading all the time. They need to go back to their jobs to get money, to pay for food. You know, they kind of have no choice. So at least if they understood that was a problem, then maybe some people can start doing something about that. And at least maybe some people would have a choice or start to make some change in this, you know, in this direction.
We cannot know at all. Yeah. No.
Go ahead.
No, please, because I've talked a lot.
We gotta seize the means of production.
You want to seize the means of productions? You want to take over?
Yeah.
Take over and give it away for free to everybody.
Well, actually, kind of along the lines of that, I mean, that's the thing. If you were in charge, like a leader is today, you could almost change things immediately. I mean, at least to some degree, or you could talk with other leaders. And I think being the people, you have to have enough people. You know what I mean? So that's why I think ultimately, if somebody said, what's your number one thing that you think needs to happen? It has to be giving people hope, showing them there's another way, understanding that everything we know is just what we've, you know, been taught, told, and we kind of agreed to, because you have to have enough people on the same page. That's the only way you're going to get the change, because we can't just implement it.
And in this society, no one, for example, talks about human behavior as if, as far as I've seen, not seriously, and asking, like, because in the end, who creates these problems? It's not a fucking bad smell in the air, right? It's like people create the problems, right? So what pushes people to create those problems? I haven't seen, and I've talked to a bunch of people, I haven't seen in schools teaching that. I haven't seen, like I told you before, I think I've talked with a girl who was involved with the UN, and with these youth panels and so forth, and I asked them, because they gave lectures and so forth, I said, how many times do you talk about human behavior? And she said, no, none. Like, we don't talk about human behavior. How come you don't talk about human behavior? Because that's the animal that we have to deal with now. So if they don't even start to talk about it, to understand how humans are influenced by the environment and what part of the environment then makes them behave badly, then we have little to no chance to do anything, because whatever we want to fix is almost like shamans trying to fix gallbladder cancer. Like, okay, you can sing as much as you want, you can have feathers and all of that is not going to change anything in the end, right? That's what I'm saying.
And I was going to say, this is the portion that's also complicated and difficult. I think I mentioned a little bit how I joke with people saying, hey, we lived back like in the 1800s. When you look back at the science of behavior or even epigenetics, like you said, it's, I think it was either you or Alex that mentioned that, predispositions in DNA, but beautifully said by somebody, I forgot what it is, that there's an override of the environment on top of that, no matter what. And then it seems like what's taught to most people is, back in the 1800s, back to human nature, back to free will, back to all those things. And it's how I actually very empathetic to a lot of people. How could they think outside of that? If it's already set up from at least they believe it's set up from when you're born, then how can they think of anything else? It's in a way it's a form of manipulation, and the science is kind of new. I also try to be understanding of that. Maybe 30, 25 years at the most. Although the research maybe in the 50s, 60s, epigenetics I think was in the 90s. So it's kind of new, and who knows, maybe it'll take another 100 years for that to be more schools. I mean, the doctors that I know, only maybe the ones that are like around 30 years old, in the early 30s or late 20s, that know of the most recent research. The older doctors, whether it's medical doctors or scientists, they usually go back to, this is what I studied when I was back in school 25 years ago, which is really old. People also don't keep up to date. So going back to what you guys said, it's pretty complicated. And it's people, right? It's complicated.
Oh, definitely. What, Roman?
Yeah.
Hey, Roman.
Hi.
What do you think about the Venus project in general and ideas of Jack Fresco? And yeah, I was curious, what are your thoughts?
In general, Venus project was like a breakthrough for me once in a while, like back in the days, because it's that feeling when you always look on the society and on the people behavior and so on some shit around, and you always think that something is wrong with that, but you never have like the right words to to combine, to gather it's all together. And once in a while you found that there is a Venus project kind of, and this guy Jack Fresco who can say these things all together in the right way, and you finally understand that first you are not alone. That and basically I think people usually like thinks about all the such inequalities and problems we have in the usual time for them. So that's but they still cannot gather it all together and find the real like root of the cause and so on. So that was like Venus project for me. And I want to like jump a little back on the topic of the like big change and how it all can be changed in terms of that, like we have society and how we can turn around and do something better. I think that's what I like on the TROM project most, that Theo and guys just propose the tools, how we can like go there, how we can solve this problem, how we can solve that problem. And from the perspective of some software developer, I can say that, for example, if we use like Jitsi software to talk around the world, to meet each other and so on, what if I say like, guys, I know the better way how to do that. Just let's forget about Jitsi and do something else. But I know it's a better way, it's kind of like that. So the problem for me here is that there is a better way, but first we need to do this idea, to implement it somehow, and only then you can like jump from the old solution to the new one, basically, because it's really hard. It's like you said, it's a complicated world. You cannot go with the kind of idea from the scratch. And I think it's what Jack told about, probably some other guy, I don't recall exactly, but we no need for revolutions anymore. We need the evolutions right now. So because revolution is always about, let's clear all the stuff, it's all bad, let's try something new. And there are always people or other things that suffer from it, because you cannot just break everything and build something new on the top. The better approach, and what I see from the software development as well, that we cannot just give people like Skype or Jitsi and then say, we think that it's something better there, let's grab it all back and then we will push it something new, because people already use it Jitsi, they already speak all together from all kind of world. You cannot just grab it all back and say that's okay, let's go with something better. Because firstly I will release Jitsi 2.0 and then say, you know guys, this is a new one, you can just jump into it, try it or something like that, and then after some time then the people adopt the new technology, I just grab it old way, just shut it down and so on.
So what you're saying is, I think maybe I got that, and I like that analogy. Is like you're saying that, well, let's take an example like Jitsi, this piece of software that we use right now. It works. It's much better, let's say, than other alternatives that are trade-based and so forth. It's great. It's open source. We may imagine how a different version of Jitsi, or not Jitsi, but a different kind of platform to communicate will look like. We can talk a lot about that. But for now, let's stick with what it is and improve on what it is and move like that, because whatever you talk about in the future is not there anyway. So if you want to work on that, work on that. But for now, we use what it is. And if it works good and if you can improve upon it, let's evolve like that. Is that what you're...
Yeah, exactly. I can brought up some new thing, for example, for this purpose as well, like Jitsi next version, But first I need to implement it. I need to show it to people. I need to prove that it works before I just go to, we need a revolution here. We need the invention here, Let's just drop it all together and came with a new one, And this is the problem, because there are always someone or someone's who will suffer from that. You cannot just clear all the stuff, clear it all out and do it from the scratch. You always need to came with the tools first, and that's what I'm. That was my point for why I adore the TROM project as well, because I see that, of course, because I can contribute to all of that in the first point. But of course, it's what I see is we try to propose the tools first, to just implement something that people can use, and then probably it's not the best thing in the world, probably it's many things to enhance or to improve and so on. But the problem is that the problem with politics and all of that for me personally is that people trying to do revolutions and they think they know how to do the things, but it's not true. It's not nothing. No one can just know everything about how people in all the big world, complicated as we said before, can live with all of that. That's the problem for me. So and the real solution for me is that what I saw from the TROM project from that. So you can propose the tools, you can propose the Wikipedia and see if the people adopt it. You provide it trade free. You can use it whatever. I don't need to. You don't need to pay it for all of that or something like that. So you just propose it. If people adopt it, it's nice. That's good idea actually, and probably we will go with it again and again. Then I can do my own version of Wikipedia, for example, and throw it to the people, and they try to adopt it as well. So nobody can know. I think that what the future we need to do, because that's what politics do. They always try to push from the top on us that, you know, you need to live like here. I think it's a good idea. Probably it is. Probably from some points I can't resist from that, but in general there are a lot of problems. It's complicated again, and probably the better way is to propose something, to try to adopt it, try to test it with all the stuff, and only then to change something. This is evolution for me. So we just try the idea, create something better, and then move it to it, and then and so on and so on and so on.
This is something I think worth mentioning. We mentioned before when we did TROM-Casts about maybe the original most problems and so forth. What I took in a different direction from TVP, of course, I got inspired by TVP a lot. And recently I got inspired a lot from open source and other volunteer organizations and so forth, is that I decided to focus on the problem, just focus on the problem. And I defined the problem straight, and I wrote a 1,000 pages book defining what it is, and I will explain it in a future documentary now. And that allowed me two things. One, to have a solid idea that resists time, is not temporary. You will, Jack's ideas don't get me wrong, are fantastic ideas, are always inspirational. And I'm going to always probably to tell people look how a future could look like in a sane society. But the designs and so forth, like we mentioned, are temporary, and all of the examples need to be renewed in order for people to understand it better. Like I've seen Jack talking about announcing on TV what foods are, whatever is needed, or libraries and so forth. We do it differently today. But even Jack said these ideas are temporary. So what I switched was to focus on a problem. And if I focus on a problem, it resists in the future until it is not existing anymore, right? If you focus on cancer, it will be there as long as cancer is, and maybe you'll find a solution in the meantime. And second, and very briefly, allows me, if I focus on this trade as the source of most problems, to get engaged now and do something now. And I think that's what Roma also was trying to explain, because he likes to get involved. For example, this Jitsi app that I'm using now, it's not made by Roma, of course, but it's packaged by Roma for our operating system. Okay, so he did that. He could do that because he had the knowledge to do it, and he can do other things. He helps with Jar and so forth. So it gives people a motivation to do something hands-on now, while also focusing not on the patchwork, because we understand GT is not going to change the landscape of video conference applications. But through this, we educate people, and we push this idea of look, whenever there are trades, there are problems. On the other hand, I'm also doing something about it. So that's what I felt with TVP more and more, that I'm left. After I watched today the future by design, this is not a criticism towards TVP, but I'm just saying how I felt. And from documentary, which I made, right? I felt like, okay, I agree, it's a brilliant set of ideas, but I do not know. I mean, unless I contact them and I try to help them here and there, I have to wait for them to do something or just educate people about it. But it seems like out of reach for me. It's not in my hands. It's something there. So I think that has an impact. I've seen over the years has impact on people overall. So again, not a criticism towards TVP. I'm just saying how I reacted to that, and probably Roma said that kind in a different way, but the same kind of thing. And I've seen that from other people. That's what I'll comment.
Yeah, exactly. So from the perspective of software development, it's like you mentioned open source, where we see how the things can be changed without to brought something from the scratch each time. So of course each people can fork the project and start from the beginning and so on and so on, but only time will show what of this project will be adopted, because most of them probably have the better ideas, or some have some innovations in that and so on. So again, in the software development, it's like the invisible hand of the trades and so on all the time, because
not the invisible hand.
yeah. But basically it's not invisible, of course. Yeah. So and I think so. It's like you always try to do the best way. You try to create the best software, but after all, There are some plans, some shitty stuff about the margin of companies and so on. It's all together become so. And the companies usually do their IPs. They try to patent everywhere and everything. So basically, sometimes people can't even talk about what they are doing at work because they are under NDA or something like that. So it's like basically it's also toxic for this kind of the great idea. And so you can see like the trait is also like the tool, so just probably last example from me. So what I am thinking about it's like when you have trait, it's also the tool, the societies like discover the things like trading that it's much better in like thousands of years ago. It's like we need to do something with somehow to do with scarcity. We need to invent some coins or something like that from something to take a trade to make things go further and so on. But it's thousands of years. Like probably it's the time to see on the things in the different way, try to invent something better, because you can't see always on this Jitsi. Probably someday you will go to another application which will be better in some ways and so on. The same things for me is as well like here, but unfortunately it's taboo for now for this society to speak about this like society things, because it's like what was written on the scratches from all the time long ago, or
is the genitalia. That's what it is. Genitalia. And the doctors don't touch that.
Yeah,
that's
exactly,
not a doctor.
Exactly.
Touch the genitalia.
Don't dare you. Yeah, and the same is about the human behavior. It's such a taboo right now because the people are. It's like a different matter. It's like it's spiritual or something like that. It's like about the religion, about your soul or something like that. But nobody can even try to discuss or brought up these topics together to try to look on the things in different way, because probably we have a better solution for all of that. That's all.
We need to pierce to this bullshit with education, of course. It's a huge fucking challenge.
Exactly.
To do that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely. I've seen a question on YouTube, and I think it's a relevant question from other reasons. But he asks, "How will sexuality and relationships work in RBE? Will it be like marriages?" And for me, it's an interesting question because of another people ask these questions. I've seen that all the time when I was at TVP. They ask these questions all the time. Like, how will that be? How will sport look like? How will relationships look like? How to raise the children and so forth? And I don't think there are answers for such questions, because you don't know. You cannot know. But the fact that people ask such questions maybe leads me to that thinking that maybe TVP, I'm not sure if it's their fault or whatever, but portrayed like describe the world in the future from many perspectives, and people take this package and they think about like, what about this? What about this aspect? Will people wear makeup and so forth? And I feel like this is the wrong way to go for both. If TVP goes that way, is wrong. I'm not sure if they go, but if they want to describe this kind of world, maybe they give people the impression that they want to build something that is like taught from so many different perspectives, and I don't think that's possible. I think that's complete nonsense. And sometimes you try to answer them. It's more like an educational movement here to say, okay, maybe in the future there won't be marriages and this and that, but in the end, I think it's wrong to assume that you can invent a society and think about all of these little nuances. I wouldn't even go that way. I wouldn't even answer such things, because I'll be like, I don't know. People should do whatever they want to do, but we need a society where people don't have to trade as much, I would say, because that makes them more shittier towards each other. So the less they are like that, the more like we don't care. They make their own lives. They want to get so-called married, whatever that fucking thing is, go and marry. I got married in this fucking society. It wasn't my will. I fucking hated that shit. I'm still married, and
it's her fault, right?
It's her fault.
It's always your
Not
fault.
her fault.
It's Sasha's fault. But
Not her fault.
so, but you see, I don't want to care about what people. How is sport going to look like in the future? Who the fuck knows? Who the fuck knows, right? Right. But if you get away from those kinds of traits, people may play all kinds of fucking games. Football may be fine if you don't want to win all the time and make money out of that, right? So I don't think it's a stupid question, but I think it's a question that comes from the understanding, the feeling that TVP gives you, at least from what I've seen, that they want to tell you how the world could be like, and I feel like these things, it's a wrong approach, not from maybe TVP's part, but maybe the way that people interpret it, maybe they should interpret it like that. Like, who knows? Jack doesn't know. Even Jack was alive. You cannot ask Jack so many questions. How is going to like medicine look like? What the fuck does Jack know about medicine? Of course, he can give you some ideas, and so forth. Don't take them too literally, I will say. So such questions, maybe are unanswerable, I would say.
Yeah, and I think Jacques said that these kind of things himself too in the Future by Design documentary. He was also saying, okay, take this as more of a macro perspective. To kind of see what the kind of global way of organizing ourselves could look like. But of course, you can't predict every little tiny aspect of it, of what's going to be inside the house. These kind of things.
And I remember that I wrote about such things when I was at TVP, about TV magazine. I think maybe even Roxanne and Jack, because they read those and they agreed. I was giving the explanation of the analogy with the metabolism. If you want to control diseases, probably you have to control metabolism, because that's all it happens in the body. But that's such a complicated thing. You cannot go there. At least not now. It's too complicated. So you look at different, like cancer separately, or heart disease, and this and that, right? That's it with societies like metabolism. It's so complicated. You don't know. So you don't know such things. You can overall give people an idea of how society may look like in the future. You pay attention to the words. Overall may, right? But you cannot do more than that. And for me, TVP will always be like a really great inspirational idea. But what can we do with that idea or so forth? To me, I'm doing this with trade, like focus on the problem. If TVP wants to focus on building a city or whatever, and I think it's a question that relates to that, and you can answer, Daniel, or it's mainly for Roma. It's from Rafa, and Rafa says, "Want a TVP city satisfy you, Roma, to see like to see a TVP city like a test to see how it would work with because you say about Jitsi, for example, what if we could create that Jitsi in like a TVP city to showcase how it works and so forth?" That's what Rafa is asking you.
Basically, of course, I'm not talking about some big things like cities, because it's also a complicated thing, So, so what I'm meaning here is that each people, while educated, while with different experiences from different places, probably can do at least something with the small things, So probably one day, when we will have like a bunch of the people which try to do at least something trade-free, to the different things here and there. Someday, if some critical mass of the people, probably we can got together and create this kind of the city, or like test version of something at least, or probably much believable is that we will have some kind of, again, a lot of great ideas, probably that we can share, or we can also implement here or there, but not like in this big kind of the cities. But it's all for me. It's probably I'm not know a lot about all of that, but for me it's like also about the critical mass of the people. So then more people we have with some willing to do something, to contribute somewhere and so on, with their experience, probably we can gather all of them together to do something. It should be a huge mass of people with this idea in mind. Of course, not for this situation for now. For example, when we have 30 people, like, and it's, of course it seems impossible to do something like that, but I can imagine that someday, probably, if this idea will go further, people can like do something. It's the same as like for open source, you know. I was recently interested in the what's about the hardware of open source, you know, not only the software but hardware. And I find out that I probably tried to look something like that in the like 10 years ago or something like that. It was nothing. It was like desert. But right now people like have these little companies. They produce like laptops of the like basic levels. And they all open source basically. So they only charge for the like for all the particles of the system and so on, but they all try to produce this idea of further to try to new ideas to use Kickstarter for to like to have their ideas pushed further and so on. So of course the same probably for the cities as well. So now it seems like how we can like take something and build something, you know. It's no such resources we have right now, but probably after some time, if we will continue to create more trade-free things, and every one of us who can do at least something in this area, probably one day we can gather it all together and create something. It will not be like some kind of impossible idea. I think it's really possible if this kind of movement will be adopted.
Daniel, Jitsi seems a bit better, or maybe a lot better than Zoom, for example. Zoom is a very popular conferencing application. Okay, why, if we have this example, we have an workable example in this world of the internet, why aren't people migrating to a better solution, or the better solution having a bigger impact? And same can be said about operating systems. So if that's being said, like, do you think like a city will have the necessary impact to change something in the society, even if you have the means to build it?
That's a great question. I mean, we can go back to how people are conditioned to always go back to what they're used to. That's one thing we can mention. We can also mention that sometimes we can give people new tools, but if they don't know how to use it, it's too new, then they might be a little bit turned off emotionally by it. I think most people here, I imagine, I'm assuming, if you go in a different school or a different job, they usually give you an orientation training. I forgot his name, but he's a software programmer, it seems. Usually when, and even from the technology perspective as well, when there's a new, we call it users, right? When they are presented with something new, usually give some training so that they can see it's a better thing for them. Sometimes people don't know what's better for themselves. And that goes on with me as well. Like even day to day, it's a girlfriend or a friend, they say, hey, I found out about this stuff. You take a look, Daniel. At first, because I'm being conditioned the same way, I'm going to be, what is that? I'm not going to know how to use it right away. So I'm going to go back to the chicken and egg problem. I'll go back to it's complicated. So there are several ways to go about it. It's not as easy to, even if we were to present something, in a way, people have to already have some knowledge to see that it's better for them, because they don't know sometimes what their own problems are, if that makes any sense. And then I see technology every day, especially people who design programs. You know, you get a consultant. I ask, hey, I would like a program to be done for me. And usually programmers will say, but what do you need it for? What is exactly your problem? And they're like, no, I just want you to do this. Just do what I'm telling you. So you see, it's, again, Theo, like you said very well, it's complicated.
Usually it's response like, do it nice, please. Do it. You know, you're a programmer, you know better, of course.
Yeah. Well, we could maybe talk about that. I didn't want to talk that much about like building a city or software, because I don't know much about that. I know that people from TVP, they say that they want to do that, but I don't know if there is any progress to that, or if they will be able to, or what are their exact plans or whatever. So I wanted to talk more about the idea itself, how you implement it, or if you can, maybe it's another discussion, but the idea itself of the Venus project and basically Jack's ideas to me are extremely inspirational, and they make sense from a technological perspective. I think they are feasible. I don't see what is not feasible about even building such cities or having most of the things automated and so forth and providing for everyone. But yeah, that's to me is very inspirational, and I moved somehow away in my journey in this life, let's say, but from the idea. But in essence, I think we agree more than disagree. We agree that this society, however we describe it, I choose to use just like a little nugget of there to say trade is influencing the environment of people and so forth. Or if you say money and economics and capitalism, in the same, they are the same things. We agree that they create a lot of misery. And then we have the goodwill of trying to imagine how we could do better. And if Jack and others from TVP imagine this mega package of how it could look like from many perspectives, I think that's great. I'm not sure how it's going to work, whatever. If I imagine like maybe making more trade-free goods and services and so forth, again, this is a struggle trying to fix a problem in the end, So if we focus on the same problem, and I think we don't vocalize it that well, but probably we are focusing on the same problem in the end, then we may go to the same direction eventually. Because if TVP manages to build, here's the thing, I completely doubt that TVP is going to ever manage, that's my view, ever building any city. But my views is my views. My views. If they manage to and it has an impact, I will be the happiest. I will be like, that's amazing. Go ahead and do it. If we manage to do more like educational, make the educational aspect more and more known in regards to trade and so forth, and create more trades, goods and services that are trade free. If we manage to do that, have any impact, good for us. I think that's great. So maybe we should remember that we are more alike than different, regardless of our difference there. That I may not think that TVP is going to build a city, or TVP may think that we are focusing on patchworking or whatever. We try to fix the same problem, I would say, in the end. That's what I would say.
I was going to propose you guys, by the way, I'm loving this discussion today here. I don't know about you guys, but I'm just going to propose this slightly little imaginative context here. Wouldn't it be awesome if we're having this discussion on major networks around the world right now, that people could listen to other things we're saying? I think that would be something really different. And I think that's where we always stop at the limiting, I don't like the word invisible, but the limitations of the system itself that makes sure the checks on it to make sure that ideas like these are not spread out very far. And even if they were, even if we had enough money, there are tons of other things that would keep things in place. But again, I'll just this recording, even whether it's live or not. If most new networks would have stuff, I just wonder what it'd be like.
Mm-hmm. But even like sharing this on TVP's social media would do a lot more than, not. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they'll do that, But that's another discussion, I guess. So
that's a good point, actually.
Because TVP has like hundreds of thousands, I think, of at least 100,000 followers. So if we shared this kind of discussion, it would reach a lot more people. Whereas, of course, we would love to reach more people, but we're just limited with who we are.
Yeah,
and if we don't work each other,
sorry.
I said that if we don't even between us, find a way to collaborate and share things and help each other, then there will be little chance for outsiders to.
Right, and that's where I think we all of us, working together, I think we all kind of want to do the same. And again, I was just imagining. Yeah, Sasha, totally agree with you. But I don't know what. I'm sure you guys in different parts around the world. I think Alex here in the United States, I could mention like NBC News, Fox News, like major mainstream television. If they were just having this, having this live all over the United States, all over the world. I don't know what other European countries, wherever you guys are, what the major news channels are. Just if they were hosting this stuff live right now, for people to listen to this, I imagine there's a high probability most people have never heard of this stuff. And again, I just what would be like, what people be like, oh wow, I never heard of this before.
They might be like communists. They're a bunch of
check in, right?
Get them off the TV.
But I think Sasha made a really great point, and that's true actually. I'm a bit sad to see that, TVP will not share this, and I don't think it was any kind of, this discussion is purely about understanding TVP and so forth. I don't think they will ever share that on their own platforms. So I will not expect any Fox News or any other to have any slight interest. So if TVP may not even decide to do that themselves when we talk about them, and I think we talked about it in a positive way in the end, like it's a great set of ideas and so forth, then I think we fail to understand what we want. I will always share. I shared about TVP all the time. We have in TROM created videos is still the channel and so forth. But it's unfortunate, and I don't quite get it. Maybe I get it, but anyways, it's something to mention because you said that, and I agree with you entirely. It will be fantastic. Imagine for people to listen to this conversation, but then it will also be a bit fantastic if TVP's followers will listen to this conversation, and because you are here, right? You are interested in both projects, and you are here to talk about them. It will be very nice to have that. But it's okay. We will do our jitsi work, and let's get close. We'll get closer to the, because then Cody will fall asleep, and we don't want that, because Cody.
What?
Because we have, let's say we have one more question maybe here in the chat, and they say, is Darwin asking, what do you think about the 5 proposals of Peter Joseph from his book? So that's maybe it's related to this or not, but I think I want to make a TROM-Cast about the Zeitgeist movement. So let's talk about that when we talk about the Zeitgeist movement. Maybe if Peter will want to join, I sent him an email. He didn't reply. But if not, we'll just go ahead and we'll discuss about the idea, because we don't wait for anyone. So yeah, we will discuss about that, maybe about TZM as well. And if people want to see more about the Venus project, we put some documentaries that some are made by them, of course. Is like the Future by Design, is the TROM documentary about the resource-based economy, is like The Choice is Ours or Paradise or Oblivion. So you can see more about the Venus project. But I'm sure many people who are familiar with TROM are also familiar with the Venus project. So, but just in case. Yeah, if anyone wants to say anything, if you go, Cody, you want to say some really wisdom-ish words.
Oh, man, it was right there. I had it. It was all planned out, and it escapes me right now. This is it. This is what you get.
That was very...
Oh, yeah. Oh, filled. Just filled.
Thank you very much. If anyone wants to say anything about the subject or whatever, and we can close it down. If not. No, everything's fine. No?
All right, everything is not on fire. All right, that's what I'd like to see. Fire.
Yeah, we'll see about the next TROM-Cast, if we're going to do or not. I want to make a second TROM documentary, and maybe if I start to do that, I will not be around that much, because I will focus on that. I would love to explain all of these ideas of trade and how societies change and all of that. I want to get more into like how that works and how to explain it better, because what we do here is education. All of us here, we do. So let's see, folks. Okay, thank you, Daniel, for participating. Maybe you can participate other times too when we don't talk about Venus project. We talk about other things. Don't just come here and talk about Venus project, okay? You're Daniel.
Agent activated.
Again, thank you for having me here. Thank all of you guys. You guys are amazing. I appreciate you guys. I know it's late for some people, especially in Europe. I always have really great joy talking to you guys.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure.
Oh, thanks.
To listen all of you and have basically all the things and topics you talk about that resides in me, and I'm definitely fine. No extra thoughts to share, because probably I always try to jump into the discussion, but someone already said something that I was so usually. So it's great to see the people who think about all the stuff in the scientific and critical way. So it was a real pleasure. Thanks,
And to
everyone.
have a civilized discussion about these kinds of subjects.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Okay, guys. We may see you next weeks, months, years. Okay. Okay, Cody.
All right.
Just
Yeah.
light this on fire, man.
I'm setting it on fire. It's going up in a smoke and stuff. Oh my god. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Take care.